Topic one. Apparently my best ever. So as we see the Josie stamp of approval, so I'm pumped. Okay. Uh, Roberta Kaplan, the leader of Time's Up, the hashtag MeToo era organization founded by Hollywood women to fight sexual harassment, resigned on Monday. She stepped down for assisting in drafting a letter for New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to discredit one of his accusers. And is this a sign of the failure of the Me Too movement? Does this illustrate that relationships will always overrule principles when dealing with harassment? Or is this just a failure of a particular organization with no further implications on the movement? So, so a little bit more background. In case you don't know, Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, has resigned. That happened after I wrote this question, but he's resigned. But there was a New York Attorney General that did a report on his behavior. Part of that report revealed that Kaplan, along with others, right, including the head of the what's that organization with the equal sign? I'm talking about
the Me Too movement.
Not the Me Too movement.
The Me Too movement.
No, the other the God.
Oh, Time's Up.
No. It's like a complete other organization. It has a blue flag.
Oh, you're talking about HRC.
Yeah.
Human Rights
Campaign. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. The head of that and the head of the Time's Up organization helped draft a letter that was going to discredit these an individual who is an accuser of Cuomo. And as far as I know, the letter was not itself published, but they were fine with it. They helped out. It's like, oh no, this is good. In any case, once this came out on that report, this woman has stepped down, and yeah. So I want to jump into that and see talk about the wider implications for the movement. So we'll start with No Justice. Do a short introduction, then we'll for everyone. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think in general with this issue, right, you've got to look at something as Me Too, which it's 15 years old as a movement now, right? So it's been going for plenty of time. This is an international movement which has had wide-reaching implications for not just the United States, but plenty of countries in the West, place countries everywhere else, Nigeria, India, Pakistan, places like that. This looks like, as far as I'm concerned, an isolated incident in this particular regard, specific to this person and their organization, right? Sure. And even then, does this will impact this person in specific, but does this really have as far-reaching implications to discredit all the work that this particular organization and all its employees have ever done, and all the money that they've raised to go towards these kind of sorting out these kind of issues, etc.? I don't really think so. And what I was looking into this as well, I was actually when you were talking about the idea, does this will people's let me just have a look at the question. I don't know it's phrased again. Will relationships overrule principles when dealing with harassment? There was a study that was published in the American Journal of Political Science saying that it showed that with the data they found, that it shows that support for Me Too is associated with a more even-handed evaluation of sexual misconduct with relation to politics, which is, again, what this is, because the person in question, Roberta, whatever her name was, she was... Her partner is a member of she is tied to the Democratic Party, right? So there was a political link here. But when you look at the actual data from the study that's been done, it shows that, again, support for Me Too makes people less likely to have particular partisan leanings with regards to these issues, and are more likely to have a more objective analysis of these situations, right? So do I think this isn't a particularly this is an endemic problem with the Me Too movement? I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Mara. Any second now. Almost there. She's almost got it.
Do I have the button?
There we go. All right.
All right, cool. I think with any movement, you're gonna have setbacks, small, big. I remember the Biden allegations. That was kind of a big setback for Me Too, but I think it's been useful overall. This kind of thing is just inevitable, I think. But overall, I think the movement will soldier on.
All right, Josie.
Okay, so kind of going into it, right? Kind of thinking about. I think there's so many facets to this, right? And one of the things that I really liked what No Justice said was the relationships to like this type of behavior when in relations to politics, because I've seen it. I've been a victim of it. And it's been very it's very hard because a lot of times people's careers are completely determinant on like the relationships that you hold with people, and in politics it takes years to cultivate that level of capital and career experience, and then as soon as you're blackballed, it's really hard to get that back and change careers from politics to something different, which is very interesting. I'm glad she stepped down. I think that's very, very critical because it really points to the fact that there was some hypocrisy there, right? And it's unfortunate that there's hypocrisy there when the Me Too movement was critical in making sure that women had more courage, and men, because I'm a Me Too survivor when I was pre-transition. So like that allowed a lot of courage. It did for me and a lot of people to be able to stand up and say, hey, this is what's happening, and we need to be able to push back. So I'm very grateful for the work that Times Up did, and just the Me Too movement in general, for awareness of sexual harassment in the workplace, to the entire issue of that dominance that was on women in a lot of ways in early careers as well. Um, is this going to be further implications on the movement? I I do not believe. I think the movement is gonna continue to forge on. I would have to hear a really good argument, if someone were to link me the idea that this would hurt the Me Too movement generally. But right now, I'm not convinced that this one allegation will cripple the movement and where it's gone so far.
Okay, thank you so much, Alice.
Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully I pressed the right button. Nice. That's a good sign. That's a good start. So, the thing about this, that this is a complicated situation. I think it was right of her to step down just because she was going to bring public harm, to the image of the Times Up, as a group. But what actually happened is a little more complicated than just like contributing to a letter. So she didn't actually contribute to the letter at all. A letter was written by Cuomo, one of Cuomo's aides, and was brought to multiple people internal to the Cuomo administration. Was then basically said, "Hey, you need to get some legal counsel to look at this." And that legal counsel was Robbie, and I can't remember her last name. But she was the legal counsel. She was the lawyer for this aide of Cuomo. And so she was the first choice. So she was come to not in a context of read this letter over as part of the movement, Me Too, or the Times Up organization. She was this letter was brought in front of her as a lawyer, as a legal counsel. So, part of it is also just the context that it was done in. Now, do I still think it's inappropriate of her to kind of provide that legal counsel in this case? Yeah, I think it was still inappropriate of her. The changes that she suggested to the letter were to remove some disparaging remarks about uh, Miss Boylan's like behavior, essentially, to her male colleagues. So there were changes made to the letter by her. But overall, it doesn't indicate anything about the Me Too movement itself. It indicates that Robbie made a mistake. Essentially, she made a mistake that caused public image issues with the Times Up organization. She made a mistake, that's gonna cause her problems in being a part of any of these types of organizations. But as a lawyer, she did the right thing for her legal profession. So that's kind of the thing here, is that she's a lawyer, and she, made a decision that matched her legal requirements, but not necessarily her personal and her kind of obligations to the movement itself, to Me Too and Times Up. So a complicated situation, essentially.
Yeah. All right. We have Maddie. Maddie, thank you for joining us. So happy to have you back, especially after last week. It was so much fun.
So mad. And now my computer has I can do Windows stuff on it now. So I figured it out. It just took for fucking
Of
ever.
course, because you have to install
But-
Windows. I don't know. What did you think it was going to take? It was going to take forever. I was saying this while
I
we
don't
were
know.
in the room, the waiting room before. Like, it's going to take forever.
Whatever. I've like worked in tech and I still am not clear on how like most of tech works. I'm like, no, you just like press a button and then it is on because I'm a child of instant gratification. This is how I've lived my life. So yeah, but I'm really bummed. I got to watch a little bit of it and it seems like you guys had such a blast. So
She's
I'm
talking
very
about
sad I
a
couldn't
game
make it.
show that we were on this Sunday. That was a lot of fun on the IMRAL's channel. It was great. I'm so happy that that I could be part of it. But we missed Maddie there. But I actually was referring to last week in terms of Lily. We're so happy to have you there.
Oh yeah, no, we had so much fun. We had so much fun, and Josie and I tried really hard to provide like twice as much spice to make up for like no one being there. So, doing the work of more than one person, every woman knows what that's like because that's what we do in the professional and real world, etc. Josie and I are proof you can have best of both worlds. You can just you can be twice as spicy.
Absolutely.
So,
Alice, thank you for the 713 sub. Really kind of you. Thanks for being around for this long. It's really great of you. All right, but Maddie, so that was your introduction. If you want that.
hi, hello, okay.
And we're on topic 1. So if you
Great.
you can.
Oh, do you want me
Yeah.
to give my my intro? Yeah, for the time's up. Unfortunately, this is yet another example of women in power shielding abusers and making excuses for them. I wish I could say I was surprised, but it is unfortunately quite common. When women are benefiting from patriarchal structures, a lot of times you will see them do what they can using their power to reinforce it. And in this case, that includes letting someone who had egregiously cultivated a working environment that was toxic, where sexual harassment was rampant, and who, by the way, in his apology today also demonstrated that he still doesn't think he did anything wrong. And there's really no excuse when you're the head of an organization that claims to be advocating for women, especially women who are victims of abuse or assault, to then, advocate for someone who pretty out in the open demonstrated misogyny and objectification and made multiple women feel uncomfortable to the point where they left for other jobs. That's stuff that is talked about. It was an open secret. So I think it's good that she resigned, but I think this should be a warning to any other women who are in positions of power. When you go to bat for someone, you better be damn sure that person is as innocent as you proclaim them to be, because if they're not, then you are part of the problem and we're never going to trust you again. So women in power, please don't reinforce patriarchal structures. Please don't protect abusers. That does not help anyone. I don't care how much good that person has done for the movement. I think please think of everyone who had their career ruined or their psychological well-being just decimated because of this person. So I don't know. Use your power for good, damn it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Open to the panel. Really? Go ahead. We can't hear you though. I'm sure you're.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So, of course, I did some research. So I actually dug up the Attorney General's report. That was the probe or was it the attorney general? It's the investigation. There was a New York,
Mhm.
Yeah,
it was a New York AG. Yeah, it was the AG investigative report on this, and there's a pretty damning line in here. Now this is how this happened. Like, I want to explain the probe of Cuomo first too, because we may not all know, which is the idea that the New York Attorney General did an investigation and a probe into the state of into the governor's office and started asking women and people in the office about their experiences with the governor, if any of those were inherently sexual or assaulty or harassment or whatever. And that's how they got all those women, right? Because it wasn't like all these women just came out. They were given anonymity. They were given, the ability to say, look, we're here to listen to you. But so this is where this report comes from. It's from the whole thing. And that's why the president came out and said he needs to resign. This is why all this stuff is coming down. And this is why the axe is coming down on the letter. So the letter denied the legitimacy of Miss Boylan's allegations, impugned her credibility, and attacked her claims as politically motivated, including with theories about connections with supporters of President Trump and a politician with an alleged interest of running for governor. So for me, I can see why she stepped down, because that is more than a mistake. Like, if you're reading a letter and you're signing your name as an attorney to that to say, yes, I agree, well, she resigned for it. I'm not trying to attack your point, Alice. I'm just trying to say that there was a very, very significant evidence that this is coming down really hard. And I also want to name one other thing about this is Fonzo David, the president of HRC, has not stepped down and has not resigned, and it doesn't seem like he's going to. So the fact that the president or the leader of Time's Up steps down for the same letter allegation is really telling as well.
I just want to like clarify one piece. She didn't sign her name to anything, and she wasn't going to sign her name. She reviewed the letter in a legal capacity and said this is legally fine to send. She didn't sign anything, and she wasn't going to sign anything to it. So just clarification. Still agree
Okay,
with
fair
you
enough.
most of the point, but yeah, she wasn't going to sign her name to it. I think she stepped down not because she did anything wrong. She stepped down because it was a public image nightmare, essentially, 4 times up.
Yeah.
So she made the
Well-
choice for the betterment of the organization itself, not for doing something wrong on her side.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
So-
Go ahead. Go ahead, Josie.
No. I just wanted to see if anybody else had anything to say about this, because like the thing is, it's like the grander expectation, like what Maddie was talking about, how like people are always rallying to help and support these allegations without evidence. But I do think it's very interesting that even and with Alice's point, like, it's even more so that Alfonso David, as somebody who is an internal staffer with Cuomo, is the one not getting blasted for this as much. And it's like, it's really frustrating because it has wider implications as well. Because on the Hill article, they specifically pointed out in the last paragraph of the Hill article, when they were talking about Alfonso David, was the fact that HRC and he himself has been leading the transgender rights charge for the Equality Act. And I was like, why did you add that? Like, it made me so annoyed. Like, it's like, that wasn't important to add because it's not even that true. Like, we have so many other equality organizations in the room right now. And to like the Hill to be like, he's the one leading the charge for transgender rights. And it's just like, no. Like, so it's just like, it was really interesting that they also just like threw that under the bus along with the HRC organization.
Mhm.
Wow.
Hope. Oh, now you can hear me. I was gonna say, like, the other thing that I just kind of found interesting is Robbie gets attacked for this, for literally being legal counsel, but David, the president of HRC, actually went out and gathered signatures for this letter and didn't get attacked for it. So what?
Right.
Why is like I feel like that this is in a way like targeted as well, like it's much easier to attack, somebody who's known for being, part of the Me Too movement rather than somebody who's just part of, the Human Rights Coalition, right? It's much easier just to say, well, it's, this shows that we should discredit this movement. This movement means nothing. Well, that's a much easier, like attack point basically than the Human Rights Coalition. So I feel like that's also part of it.
I mean, people hold women to higher standards generally. That's just, part and parcel of these kind of processes. And second of all, people have a natural, like, gut reaction against perceived hypocrisy, right? It's not, it's not in any way, like, logical way to be able to interact with these things, because whether someone is being hypocritical or not is not an attack against anything that they say or do, right? All you're doing is pointing out the hypocrisy. But we have this gut reaction because we hate the idea that someone doesn't act in line with their principles. Which is why I think that there's this different visceral reaction to these two parties in this particular regard. Plus, it makes better headlines, right? If someone's being hypocritical and is in this position of power, it makes it so much easier to be able to generate clicks throughout, through the media lens. If someone is part of an organization which is directly linked to the issue at hand, in the case of Time's Up.
I mean, for me, I feel like I already have such. This is going to sound bad. Like this, I have such low expectations for men anyway, when it comes to how they act. That I think maybe that's why when it's a woman, I get more frustrated, and it's not fair. You're right. Like, because we shouldn't hold women and men to different standards or see it as different. Because I 100% agree. I think it's fucked up that he's not getting the same kind of heat. But for me personally, I think it's because when a man is revealed to be protecting or, shielding an abuser, my thought is like, of fucking course he is. But when a woman is doing it, I'm like, how dare she? And I know, and maybe that's my own internalized misogyny, but I think that for me at least is why I have a different reaction. Because for the men in power, this is me being pessimistic. I kind of expect a lot of men in power to excuse misogyny and just sort of wave it off or try to downplay it. But for women, I almost, because we experience it constantly, it almost makes me be like, you should know better. But then again, the men should know better too. But that maybe is, at least just from my vantage point, why maybe a lot of people, especially on the left, especially left women, are treating the two differently.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
And then, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say that I get frustrated kind of with the Me Too movement as it is already. I hate that women are constantly having to share their traumatic experiences in order for people to give a damn about what's going on, as opposed to, men just giving a damn anyways. So yeah, let's see. So I don't know if this relationship will always overrule, with, people remaining friends or helping out sexual abusers and perpetrators. But I hope that we can shift the culture so that we can reduce sexual harassment and violence in all spaces, whether that's through education, training, just really learning to value and respect women in general. I thought it was really cool that actually in 2014, Vice President, well then Joe Biden, had a program where he did a national campaign for a bystander thing, and did this bystander intervention training, which reduced, in this study, I think it was 12% of sexual assaults. So yeah, there's things that we can do. I think that it's definitely a huge cultural shift. But yeah, I'm just sick of it always falling on women's shoulders.
Amanda, though, isn't that just part and parcel of advocacy, right? If you're doing advocacy for immigration, right? Well, then you talk about what's it like for people who are undocumented to move through the country and not have rights. If you're doing gay for gay marriage, right? You talk about like what's it like to be denied access to institution and everything that comes with it. Isn't that like you just have to tell your stories to do these things for like advocacy and just in general?
Well, isn't that like a cultural thing? Like, why are we required to share traumatic experiences? Like I said, for anyone to give a damn, why can't you just give a damn without any, personal details? Also, now I lost my train of thought.
I think it's a human thing, right? Like, I mean, like just
Oh
yeah.
yeah, no, like
Sharing
like
stories is
advocacy, like we
different
could
than
do, yeah,
sharing
like we can share
trauma.
facts
Mm.
and statistics, and yes, there is like sharing stories and stuff, but it doesn't seem to be enough anyways. Like I don't know.
I mean, I hear you. I hear you that like the process is painful. Like I'm reminded of I talked about this the other day. Like African Americans during BLM, like showing police violence, right? And like at some point when you show like a clip of a black man being shot, right, or beaten by the police so many times, like then it's like, are you actually getting any news value out of this, or is it just like you're getting value out of the gratuity of it, So like I hear you there, but literally people don't care. Like that's the civil rights movement. They showed kids being attacked by dogs, and I just feel like it's a human thing. Like, oh, now we care. We might have understood that something was happening in the South, but like we didn't really care before. But now that we see it, now we care. I don't know. Seems like a human thing.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just sucks.
Alice?
Yeah.
It's too bad when the onus to get people to give a damn is having to like just almost like they have the burden of proof that their trauma is valid and that it's bad enough to actually give a shit. Whereas for a lot of issues that maybe affect people who are in otherwise like a white man, they don't have as much of a burden to like prove that those issues are bad and that they matter and that they're worthy of fixing. With women, I mean, even when like so many women can share their stories and yet we're still not believed, and there's still an air of distrust when we advocate for ourselves. And I think that's shared among a lot of oppressed groups. That just isn't something that their oppressors are faced with to the same degree.
Alice, you had something to say previously.
Yeah, I kind of have a little bit of a spicy question. So, first off, I'm just gonna demolish my own point by saying that Tina Chen is also reviewed this letter and also approved this letter. So just point that out. Tina Chen is the CEO for Time's Up, and as far as I know, she's not stepping down. But what I'd kind of just found a little interesting is Roberta Kaplan is trans. So I'm kind of wondering if I wonder if that informs her kind of like life experience at all. Like, I will say that, we have different experiences in some ways as trans women, especially someone who's later transitioning and is essentially, transitioned after having a very successful, life, being seen as a guy. Um, so I also wonder if that has anything to do with kind of her reaction and how close she was and to this situation and how this didn't override her. Like kind of like she didn't see how this could be problematic to approve a letter like this. I'm not saying necessarily that has 100% to do with it. And again, Tina Chen, who's a cis woman, also reviewed this letter and also said it was fine. So I will, mention that. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting part of this. It's like she's trans, she kind of fucked up here. Tina Chen is not having any pushback at all. There's like a lot of like interesting facets of this whole story.
Hmm.
Go ahead.
That's really interesting, because I haven't really thought about that in that way. I so there's a couple ways you could look at it, right? So just to make sure I didn't get you wrong, are you saying that the former, like the life that she lived, kind of informed the decision to step down, or informed the decision to sign the letter?
Oh, I mean, so not both. So I would say what I'm talking about is the decision to sign the letter. So we're talking about like women's experiences and how women experience this type of stuff all the time, but that's not necessarily true of a later transitioning trans woman. She may not have had the experience that we're talking about to the extent that we're talking about. Now I know this
I
is a
don't
real.
know.
I said I was going to inject spiciness, and this is
Yeah,
a really spicy.
this is very spicy because I actually am I'm a survivor, a Me Too survivor, and that happened to me pre-transition.
Mhm.
So
Or the
so
same thing.
yeah, right. So a lot of trans women do experience that in their own a lot of ways as well. I would say that her stepping down with a trans identity because she's already a marginalized identity, that there may have been more optics for her to step down and not hurt the community as a whole. Um,
Why isn't
I would
Tina Chen being asked to step down though?
well, yeah, I agree. I think they should all step down. And I think that it is wrong that we are, that this is what's happening, and the fact that the trans woman is, the fall person for all of this is really enlightening because, you know, the lived experiences of the trans identified folks on this conversation, like we all understand like it's hard to get a leg up in this world as trans identified folks, and like somebody at this level is like, oh, I better step down right away. I don't know, I could see her being like,
Mm.
I'm trans, I better step away before trans becomes the reason why I'm not stepping down.
I mean, so yeah,
It's
I don't want to get
speculation. It's speculation
yeah.
anyway.
I
Yeah.
don't want to get too into spiciness. Like, I don't want to get too into spiciness, but there's definitely questions that I would have about kind of the lived experience piece here. Because I definitely think lived experience is relevant to how you're going to make your decisions, essentially. And, Roberta Kaplan transitioned late in life, very late in life. And so she's already had a very, very successful life presenting as a man, a very, very successful political and legal life presenting as a man. So I do wonder if that had any effect on kind of the decision making process here. I think it's an interesting part of the equation here. I just think it's kind of interesting that she headed up this Time's Up movement, and then made a really stupid mistake like this. Because we can all agree this is a dumb mistake. Like,
Yeah.
this is something that you should be able to foresee, like, as being a problem, right? Like, reviewing a letter that discredits a survivor of sexual assault as the head of an organization helping people who are survivors of sexual assault. That's a dumb mistake. That's a really stupid mistake to make, and it shows like
Yeah.
a focus on this like political relationship building rather than a focus on the actual like ideological goals you have. And I'm just like, I think it's an interesting facet of the conversation is does that have anything to do with it? Did that affect her decision making? Did the political side of this affect her decision making as well? Like, I think the decision making side of it is what's kind of interesting to me. Like, does lived experience affect that decision making process for her?
I would assume that everyone's like lived experiences help formulate their decisions. I had a kind of another question to add on to yours. Do we think that we're moving kind of away from this type of culture? The reason I ask is because most of the people that are being accused are much older. That's not diminishing any survivors who have had this happen in our generation, but yeah, do we think that it's just people's success and so then they want to tell their stories? Or
So,
yeah.
Amanda, you're going to someplace interesting, and someplace I kind of want to take this. It's not that I think it's a generational thing, because, yeah, as you already know, I don't have to tell you all, right? That women experience this from all parts of their lives, right? And younger women right now are having to deal with stuff like this as well. But it's about the organization Time's Up in particular. That, as I understand it, was formed by like Hollywood women, right? That this was like part of the brainchild of a few elites, right? And it's been targeting elites, and this is what I've heard this criticism before, is that like the only thing that gets attention is when like a person of privilege, usually, oftentimes, is being harassed by another person of privilege. Right? So like the Hollywood actresses being harassed by a producer, or another actor, right, who gets out of jail any which way. And like there are several like examples, iterations of this. And so it's not surprising to me that it's older gentlemen who are being attacked because they were more successful. They were in those positions of power, right? The positions of power we're talking about. So it's not as if younger guys, right, guys my age, aren't doing similar things, I think. But it's just we aren't targeting people in those statuses, right? So like a person my age isn't like putting their hands on a Hollywood actress, right? Because we don't have the position of power to, get them in that position, right? We haven't gotten there yet, but we will. But that doesn't keep us from harassing someone of our age, in a status maybe lower than ours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the the movement's been around since what, 2012? Like the MeToo movement, and I don't know, I just think that there's been lots of conversations and people's more aware of their behavior and how that behavior can impact themselves or consequences for them. So it's not that I think society is growing to respect women. It's more, I think they're maybe scared, I guess, of being held
there's
accountable, which is kind of
consequences.
funny because it's not like anyone's still really held accountable, right?
Some people, but
Yeah.
people aren't seeing jail time, but people are losing resources, which is a step, which is a step.
Some are like, fucking Louis C.K. is just about to like embark on another tour where he's playing Madison Square Garden, and like, it came out that he like masturbated in front of women who did not consent to it. So like there are some consequences, and I agree, like I think it's good, but unfortunately we see so many of these men, like it's not that difficult for them to all of a sudden have some sort of like redemption tour, and then it's fine. It just, I think as long as we fail to like confront toxic masculinity in our kids and like teach boys that, like, I don't know, this obsession with like dominating and treating women like garbage, and this need to like be violent or to sort of like, dog eat dog, whatever. I don't know that we're going to see much change. Maybe we will, because people are more scared. I think Amanda's right. Like, I think people are more scared because, like, unless you're like very, very powerful, you can largely get away with it because the media moves on quickly, and you can maybe evade consequences. But I don't know. I don't. It bums me out because even in my generation, even in like Gen Z, even on the left of people who claim to advocate for women and care about women's rights and protecting women from assault and whatever, I still see a lot of rampant just like misogyny and toxic masculinity. And as long as that is pervasive in our society, it's going to lead to women and like gender non-binary being abused and harassed.
I
I
think
think.
the
Oh, sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right in that. I think we spend a lot of times with these conversations talking more about the punitive aspect, or like how are we going to deal with the people who've already done it, when we should be having a bigger conversation about the preventative measures that we can take to make sure these things don't happen in the first place. Because you can't unharass somebody, right? That's no matter how punitive you are, that's happened, right? We don't want it to happen in the first place. So my friend is a head of a charity in the UK called Consent, who run around doing consent classes in workshops in schools, universities, colleges, places like that. And what we're not seeing is this paradigm shift, this sea change in attitudes from young men that we would have expected to, considering the growth of the Me Too movement, etc. Right? We're not seeing from his I guess limited but at least somewhat professional perspective. He's still having to teach these people about the way in which consent works, because I guess at least he's there to be able to do it in lieu of the people who aren't doing it. But clearly, the change in perspectives that we should be seeing and be trying to see aren't happening in the way that we'd expect.
Should that be a surprise?
I-
No, go ahead, Amanda. You go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like behavior was, socially accepted prior to the Me Too movement that isn't quite accepted anymore. And so I can see this change likely happening, especially as a parent, because there's conversations I've had with my children that I never would have had with any adults as a kid growing up. And I know that like all my friends that are parents and stuff have had these same conversations. I know that schools are starting to teach more things. I think one thing that we do need to do, I posted or tweeted earlier because I was curious, and I wonder if anyone on the panel here, during like a work sexual harassment training, has anyone ever been taught like the power structure and power dynamics and stuff? Because I never have. So I'm like curious how good that education is there. I know it's great in my house.
Well, I got it, but I got it through the Democratic Party, and because there was quite a bit wrong in the California Democratic Party, we had the chair step down, because my friend was one of the Me Too survivors on that incident, and it was actually a gay man, and so we had that Me Too movement happen, and then locally in San Diego with my incident that happened. And so the Democratic Party is like, all right, let's talk about power. Let's talk about power dynamics, because it's not just gender related either. It's, just the sheer fact that like people that have power over you can do really screwed up things. And the idea of like, one of my favorite thing to think about when I think about this stuff, and this is something for the audience to think about too, is how often have you been in a room when you're at work in a workspace and the manager or supervisor comes in, tells an awful joke that could be off color or just a little borderline cringy or just bad, and everybody in the room laughs? That probably happened to a lot of you. And what happens at that point is the boss is like, all right, I'm so cool, I'm so awesome, I'm edgy, my employees love me. And they're blind to the power dynamic that they actually have with the people. And then they use that power unwillingly sometimes, and they're just like, they just steamroll people because they don't even understand the power dynamic of them even being in the space provides for a lot of people. And I think it's very, very critical for us to understand power dynamics, because power dynamics is what leads to most abuse settings in the workplace or any place where there's authority, where there's doctors, sometimes religious leaders, teachers, coaches, all of these things that lead to unequal power dynamics that lead to a lot of abuse. So I think it is one of the core issues when we talk about sexual harassment and sexual violence, as a whole. So no, thank you for bringing that up. And I am also willing to engage, like the idea that Alice was bringing up a second ago, was the idea of how even with all this stuff, like the person is trans rights are still being brought up, and how that could be a signal to be like, look, like these trans predators. And that's something that I would also like to possibly explore, but not necessarily have to. I just want to throw that out there. If you want to explore that thought.
Well, first of all, Josie, I'm in luck. I will never be in a situation where my power dynamics gives me inflated sense of entitlement, because I have you here to tell me my ideas are shit week after week. It properly deflates my ego, right? So
good, I'm here for it.
So no yes women around here. All right, so
Doing the Lord's work, Josie.
That's right. One PrimeCayes at a time.
But
I think it's crazy that California's Democratic Party had a sexual harassment.
Oh, we've had it.
Policy.
We've had a few instances of it. I know in the Bay Area, a former friend of mine, there was a guy who was running for some sort of like position within the Democratic Party, but it needs to be elected. And he like had posted revenge porn of her because they had dated, and apparently he had a history of doing this. And people, it was like one of those open secrets that people knew about, but just didn't want to do anything. And yet he claimed to care about, you know, women's rights and support abortion and all this, as if that gave him a waiver where it's like, okay, well, as long as you support that stuff, then I guess you can treat like a couple women like crap. It's like, it's not how it works. You don't get like an abuse waiver. It's still abuse.
That's what Weinstein did. He did exactly that. Remember that letter after he was caught talking about like all his lefty shit that he's supported, right? Literally what he tried to do.
Yeah.
Well, I see that a lot on the left, unfortunately. I mean, and even on like the far left with the former host of Chapo Trap House, Virgil something.
Virgil Texas.
But it came out, Virgil Texas, that's right. It had come out that he was grooming like an underage girl, and this happens all the fucking time with a lot of people like it, obviously on the right, like just misogyny is like a core component of their identity, but like even on the left where people should be, you would think, like, because they support equal pay, they support maternity leave, they support like, you know, gender equality, whatever that means, but like they don't live those values. They still like treat women in their lives like garbage. They still and then they use their advocacy or their supposed like feminist accolades, whatever, to shield themselves from any accusations of whether it's harassment, abuse, just whatever. I mean, even here in San Francisco, the guy who was running to unseat Nancy Pelosi, Shahid Buttar, like his entire campaign staff quit because of his rampant misogyny.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, so it's frustrating because again, you would think that someone's politics or the way they advocate for things should influence how they themselves act, but we see so many times where that just isn't the case. And that's why I point more to, like, I think it's good to have consequences, it's good to demand accountability, but like the real problem here is this pervasive toxic masculinity in our culture, and the notion that they can like steamroll women and then, you know, but say, oh no, you can't do anything because I'm a feminist, and if you accuse me of this, then you're going to set the movement back. And that's like, no, fuck them. Like, live your values.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with that power dynamic, right? Like we lost in San Diego when Bob Filner, who was the former congressman that was the mayor of San Diego, he got out because of his sexual allegations. So, and you know, it really, there's so much of that it's just so ubiquitous in like all environments. And it's like, we have to be able to teach people, you know, and it really starts with the whole consent model, right? Like it really is that fundamental, you know. It's like if everybody just knows the rules of consent, maybe when they're acting stupid in a power dynamic, they'll be like, oh wait, this is a red light. I can't do this no matter how cool I think I am, and this person thinks I'm cool, right? Like that, like those power blindness situations could maybe help illuminate some things for people when they don't realize that things are there, you know. And so I think that would be something that would be very important. But yeah, but remember, we're calling out a lot of things on the left, but there's a lot of things that happen on the other side too, and it's just
let's not
really bad all over the place. You know, we can think of a few Democratic cases because they're hopefully more few and far between than the other allegations with Matt Gaetz and like all the other things that go on. So like we actually there's so nobody like, so I just want to make that clear, just to say that there is plenty of criticism the law the other way.
But
I think
Another case
I
of
talk about this similarly to the way, sorry, really quickly, similarly to how I say with men, I had just like low expectations anyway. I think that, oh, is that what you, yeah, like I
yeah, that's
already
exactly
have
what I was
such
gonna
like,
say.
I have like
Yeah.
negative expectations
Yeah.
for the other side. So it's like,
Yeah.
that I get more like fired up when it's someone on our side because it's like, no, you these are the values you profess to care about and fight for, and you can't embody them. You refuse to. So you want to like it's all that tells me then that your advocacy is performative. So yeah, like that's why I get more fed up. But yeah, let's not pretend the other side doesn't have it rampant because we had a president who has how many accusations of rape or
Yeah.
sexual assault, like a lot.
Yeah.
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 Then you have to look at how many people actually took Tara Reid seriously in those allegations, right? Clearly, there were some people who were clearly blinded by partisanship in that regard.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to I think there's a lot of interesting points you're bringing up. No Justice. You said something earlier that I wanted to go back to, talking about like not seeing some sort of like a sea change in young men, and I was gonna say that are we like surprised, right? Like I don't think that's all that surprising when how is these ideas of like consent supposed to get to these people through osmosis? So like all we've seen mostly is powerful men in Hollywood that have done something bad, right? One, if you don't watch the news, then most of it's going to go over your head any which way, right? And two, even if you do, it's not as if they explain like the right way to do things, right? It's not like they take this opportunity. Like, look at any news report. Right? Do they like sit down and explain like the ins and out of consent and proper workplace behavior? Like, none of that happens. So,
I mean, how many young men are watching the news? How many young men are watching these kind of things to take advantage of these issues? Like the reason why I say we might have been expecting some kind of sea change is the advent of social media, online activism. Like people are, they're within touching distance of all of the political discourse that's going on at their fingertips on Twitter and TikTok and Facebook. All these kind of platforms where fourth wave feminist kind of thought, which otherwise would have been confined into academia or into particular social justice spaces, is now widely pervasive throughout all of these social justice, these social media apparatus, right? Like people are in contact with these. Maybe, sure, some people will see that more often and they will be reactionary towards it. But you can clearly see the ways in which these ideas have spread much further than they wouldn't have done were it not for these particular applications, right? Which is why I would be surprised that there isn't such a sea change going forward, right?
no,
You see what I mean?
I see with that there is more opportunity for it to happen, but I'm just like thinking of the daily life. Like, okay, so I'm like immersed in politics, so like I get these messages, right? So and I have that opportunity to talk about these things again and again and again. But I'm just like I'm thinking of my friends, right, who are not political at all, right, and what messages they're getting out of this. One might be don't like well what I've heard is like well just like don't talk to women like at work, just like don't talk to them, like period. It's to avoid contact, right? Like because hey, you might get accused. This is what I'm hearing from them, right? That it's just not worth it. Like who knows what should be done, right? Like I guess I can't flirt or whatever, right? Or any interaction that I do engage in, right? Even if strictly professional, might be interpreted as flirting. So like at what point, this is what I'm saying, like at what point in their daily lives do they get to have these conversations? Like I had these all the time, but I think most people don't, who are not ensconced in it, like just who aren't surrounded by this. Like when do they have time to really discuss it?
So
Yeah.
I think it's weird that
no, I was just gonna say, my fiance has a lot of younger cousins, and so I've gotten a little peek into the world of just like, okay, like how are young people like getting information, engaging with the world, and I think actually No Justice is right on point. they are, but not Twitter, like some of them maybe, but like a lot of them, it's like they still they love TikTok, they love things like Snapchat or Reddit, or like there's so many other places where young kids are just, they're going on their phone constantly, and like getting information and learning. Like one of the things I love that has become prolific on Twitter, on TikTok, is people doing like informational videos, or like saying things that are related to, or like politics adjacent, that maybe deal with like social justice issues or consent, or just like, hey, this is okay, this isn't. And those are things that like those kids are viewing regularly. They're always on those apps. So I think they may not be as dialed into the politics realm in the way that you and I are, because we very much are immersed in it. But if you're thinking about like having conversations like that, I think a lot of those conversations are started based on something they've seen on YouTube, something they saw on TikTok. Like that's the reality.
So
They have these
It's
conversations in school.
Mhm.
I know that Dan Lay, my daughter, she's going into middle school. Oh no. This last year brought home like a little pamphlet. It wasn't like extremely detailed or anything, but we've, like I said, had our own talks. I do want to say that like this whole idea that like what can you do at work, and men not speaking to women because they're scared of what could potentially happen, is just plain stupidity. I know in Iowa, at least, that for you to get in trouble, you have to have been warned and requested. So, like, if you were to go up and smack somebody's butt, and the person laughed and you did it again, that's not sexual harassment. The person would have to say, "Don't do that." Um, so I hate that framework though, because it does put it back on the person that is getting harassed.
why
Yeah.
why didn't you fight back? Is what
Don't
basically
touch
what
my
it is.
ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like
Don't touch my ass.
don't leave them alone.
Easy.
Yeah. But like
You wouldn't do
this,
it, like, yeah.
this whole idea
Sorry.
that like you're fine, you do like one thing and oh no, your whole career, no, that's not how it works. That's not how the laws work. That's not how society works. I'm like,
How would they know any of that? So okay, so all right.
Wait.
hold on,
how do
hold
I
on.
know that?
No,
I actually got fired.
No, you.
recording.
That's fine. You. I'm saying other
Yeah.
people, right? Like who don't engage in the laws. So like one, I gotta say, I love how Maddie called other people young people. Maddie.
Stop it.
No,
Oh my God.
I
Jesus
know,
Christ.
this is you. No, I didn't say it. But okay, so
I'm the old lady here.
Amanda, I think that's amazing. If apparently if they're having conversations in like school, like middle school, about like that. I know I didn't have any conversations at all about that when I was that age, right? So that's exciting. So that's something I never heard about. I hope this is more widespread. Maybe it is, maybe it's not.
Me Too was talked about in high school quite a bit as well.
Okay.
So I've been.
Well, then that's a change. But I'm wondering the people who are in between, at least, right? Because those people you're talking about, those kids, are not in any position of power, right? They're still learning, right? The people who are not in school, they might be engaging like in TikTok, right? But like, I don't know. I feel like yes, those informational conversations are happening there, but is it? I mean, is that enough? Is like how many people are actually engaging with it? I mean, there could be a popular video, but like what does it mean to? Well, you're engaging on a platform. You could be watching any fucking video. But even if you are watching a video, are you actually engaging with it, or are you in the comments section and saying like, "This is like women whining again," right? Like I just want to. This is what I'm saying. Like I want people to have more places to make these kind of like discoveries and like reevaluate their own behavior, you know?
Well, they're doing that as they're growing up, aren't they? Like in school, like it's no longer socially acceptable to go up and smack a girl on the butt or to be mean and flirt with her like it used to be. Those behaviors are getting corrected in daily activity. I hope they're getting corrected anyways. I know that like with bullying and things like that at school, and with the Me Too movement, there is schools are taking things like this a little bit more seriously.
Well, I think it's also like not only the boys receive education on it, but I think also the girls are finally being like they have a vocabulary and knowledge about this stuff to be able to call it out. Because this is the kind of stuff that like I growing up, I don't know that I was like equipped to call it out in the same way. I would say like, oh, that's messed up, but I wasn't taught about like what enthusiastic consent and what that actually meant. Like I generally knew it, but I think because I mean, as Amanda mentioned, it's part of like their curriculum now that they're talking about. And it's something that is talked about often. I mean, not only in just like stuff that content creators make, but I think in a lot of like TV shows, the way they portray relationships or just people interacting has evolved. And it's because like the things that maybe used to be considered normal or whatever, they just don't hold up over time. You know, it's different times. So when you see that shift in like the media, that the culture will reflect that to a degree. But I don't know. I think it is worth like, of course, you're going to get the boys that push back and that like just like shit post in the comments. I mean, God, who hasn't been like an edgy teenager that is so excited to like post their contrarian bullshit and then feel very special, like a unique unicorn because wow, how like shocking. But you evolve. And I think, you know, the more that this stuff is called out and is seen as like socially unacceptable, not only among like the girls like in school, but also by the boys. If you're called out by your guy friends, that's going to have an impact. And like that's why I tell my guy friends, my brother, my fiance, it's like, no, don't just brush off like casual misogyny or whatever. Like there are ways you can call it out where you're not like gonna put someone immediately on edge, but like it's on you as an ally to call it out when you see it. And like and say, hey, that's kind of like don't say that, or like, hey, don't call her that. That's not cool. Because that's how we keep each other accountable. And then also with boys, the research that has shown that like the way they develop better attitudes towards like consent and women is like one of the correlations they found is if men or boys are socialized from a younger age to be comfortable expressing their emotions and be comfortable expressing how they feel and are met with like validation, believe it or not, that like makes it so that it's easier for them to relate to just other people in general. So and that like translates over to where they end up like on average having healthier more like progressive attitudes towards relationships rather than having like strict sort of like gender rolled ideas of what a relationship, like even a friendship between a man and a woman should look like and how they should treat women. So yeah, boys, socialize them to respect boundaries and express themselves. And just like be nice and call shit out.
Mara, do you have anything to add? Okay. All right. Well, you guys, ladies, are pointing out like signs of hope that I haven't actually seen. So I want to like, I hope you're right. You know, like I hope that these conversations are.
Well, the education, the education of young women is always going to make things better in this regard. You know, when it comes down to it, when we're given the language to be able to call out bullcrap, like we can actually push back. Like when my little sister was in high school, so she's only 3 years younger than me, and she is 32. So she when she was in high school, I guess it was in the early aughts, and so she was being abused, sexually harassed by the high school quarterback in a small Texas town. And like so when she went to the principal, they brushed it under the rug, and then when she went to the police because they wouldn't escalate it because it was getting really bad, then everybody around her including the football players, the cheerleaders, the popular kids, are saying, "Oh, that's the girl ruining that guy's career." And so much so that she basically dropped out of school and had to get her GED outside and that's what ended up happening. So I don't know how well that would go this time. So you know, there's really no telling. And it was a very sad experience for our family that my sister literally got bullied out for being harassed and wanted to speak up. And there was just no tools or anything to be able to protect her.
Mhm.
So I honestly believe, at least my speculation, that if it were to happen now in 2021, that I think she would have had more protections legally and would have had a bigger audience of people that would have stood up for her instead of her being all alone when that happened.
Mm.
I'm sorry that happened to your sister. That's
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Yeah,
I
but she's
was
okay.
I
She's a registered
yeah.
nurse now. She's doing fine.
I mean, yeah, well, like men, like they just treat like students differently too, or they did. Now I think it's gotten a lot better because there is a bit more accountability and like there's media attention on a lot of these things. Like I was chosen. I like auditioned and was chosen by the teachers to be a speaker at graduation. It was me and the
Of course you were.
student council president,
Of
whatever.
course you were.
No, I know. I put together a great speech. However, I was not allowed to. A week or a couple days before graduation, we had like grad practice, and all the like what's it called, programs had been printed, everything was ready. Because I wrote a fucking live journal post about how like this one teacher, like she denied me entry to the end of school dance, which is where like everyone signs your yearbook. So like when you're a senior leaving, it's a big fucking deal. I had already told them I was going to be late because I had volleyball practice, because like that's how I fucking went to college, is like played volleyball. And she didn't let me in. I just fucking ranted about it because I was like, okay, well, at least I can put it out there healthy. Some girl who like had bullied me found it, printed it out, gave it to the teacher, and they prevented me from speaking. The year before, literally the year before, a guy was still allowed to speak at graduation, even though a month before graduation, he fucking like got suspended for egging a bunch of freshmen and like hazing a bunch of freshmen. But mine was seen as like, no, but that is a really bad reflection on us. But like actual fucking like violence by a guy was totally okay. And I think now, like I think then I tried to push back on it, but like I didn't feel equipped to. Now you fucking bet I would like fight back on it and push and say like this is a clear violate, like this is just sexism plain and simple. And I get that that's not like a harassment like situation, but it just demonstrates that attitudes towards how students in general are treated and the way that their behavior is framed through the eyes of like school administration, it has evolved in a good way. And like it's crazy to think that like this wasn't that long ago and that still fucking happened.
So do you think this kind of boys will be boys mentality that the administrations of these institutions have, do you think that's changed?
That's a good question. I think to some degree. So I think the types of behavior that fall under that category of boys will be boys, I think it's that definition has narrowed greatly, but I do think that there still is that like pervasive underlying message that like women and girls aren't given the same benefit of the doubt or the same like margin of error to fuck up. And boys, it goes beyond fuck ups. Like their bad behavior is just tossed aside, or they put the onus on the victim to say, well, just brush it off. Just, you know what? Like they're looking for a reaction. Just let it go, rather than condemning the person, the aggressor, actually perpetuating the bad behavior. So no, I absolutely do think that it's still pervasive. However, there's a lot of behavior and situations that I think may have been like swept under the rug a few like a decade ago that would not fly now.
Yeah,
But that's
clearly
not
there
to,
was
yeah.
Yeah, clearly there was a long road to walk, right? We clearly had a massive shortfall in the disparity in the way the women and I guess boys and girls in school were treated, right? Because I maybe it's just my Brit bonger confirmation bias here, but I still see a really quite large disparity in these things, but obviously smaller than it used to be.
So
Go ahead, Josie,
I
please.
wanted to ask, were we gonna move on to the next topic? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's not time yet. We're gonna do that later on.
Not time yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just curious.
Okay. Yeah, I still things I wanted to explore. So
Yeah, for sure.
talking about those relationships, and how important they are to like keep these things, because and this ties into the whole lived experience piece, right? Like, well, one, like I think men, especially men with so much attention on them, like literally cannot get away with all these incidences without like people who are accomplices, right? Or who or there's a word that I'm looking for here and I just cannot find it. But they watch enablers, yes, like enablers, you know, that it's so much easier. I mean, you can observe this behavior, you can see it's wrong, but then he's your friend, right? This guy could actually be your friend. Like these people aren't like just straight up monsters, right? Like some guy in a bush jumping out at you, right? These are of individuals that can be charismatic, can be fun to be around, and so well, you excuse it in that way. But then also add power to that, and the fact that they can get you something, right? They can get you places. That's another reason not to interfere, not to say anything, right? And I guess, especially once you start to realize that this is something that's been going on for a long time, like I think before it comes out, it's not real, right? If we can keep this from coming out, if it's just, it can just be this one person, right? And they're causing trouble. And it's not real until like the world knows about it, right? Because once the world knows about it, then it's real, and then I've had something to do with it. And so now I have a reason to make sure it doesn't happen, or make sure this never comes out to the public. I'm just like imagining like all the reasonings for all these people to not say anything, because people knew, right?
Well, Prime, I guess but okay, so we're on that murky territory right now. So what do you mean we all knew? Or they knew?
They knew.
Like they knew what exactly?
I mean,
because that's a big thing,
Yeah.
right? Like if they knew that women were being sexually assaulted, yes, they are just as effed up as the person doing the assaulting. But if you're like, oh, he just tells a dirty joke from time to time, type of situation, and perpetuates rape culture, because that happens all the time, where there is a confirmation bias, of like, some guy makes and I've experienced this pre-transition when I was in the Navy. Some guy will make some explicit sexual joke, and then the other guys in the room will laugh because they're like, oh yeah, he's just joking, blah, 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 blah. But there would be somebody in the room that is just like, oh, this is funny. This is okay. All right, cool. I'm laughing too. I'm going to make the next explicit joke. And then that perpetuates rape culture. And then all of a sudden that person goes and does something to somebody and everybody's like, oh my God, we were kidding. That wasn't real. Like, you can't do that. Like, that type of stuff. But like the idea of like, there's a difference between that, I think, than the explicit understanding that that person is physically or sexually harassing somebody. Because if somebody knows that, then that's like you're an accomplice. If you know, like people like, if you like, that's how other people go to jail or other people get sued, is like, oh, this person knew about it. Guess what? They're on the lawsuits too, and they're also liable for damages as well. So there's really is a definition there.
So okay.
Well, and like I think what one thing just to add on to that, like I think there's a distinction between someone who interprets things in jest or whatever, and then takes that as an approval, or like, okay, then this is okay, versus or like, the people that were making those jokes, could they be seen as like influencing that behavior, or someone, whether they knew that it was happening, or like what I think I more often see, especially when it's a woman and who's protecting like a male abuser, where the male abuser like is abusing or harassing, and like it maybe is accused of it, but the woman like, but he tells her like, oh, they're lying, or it was a mistake, or it was a one-time thing, and so it's almost this like willful ignorance, or just choosing to not believe the victim because they have this prior relationship. So I think it falls into a few different categories.
Yeah,
So
Prime. So which one is it?
okay, Josie, I feel like when I say the next phrase, like you and I are like on the cusp of a fight. So like everything, Josie, it's on a spectrum.
I know. But there's like, well, that's fine. What is that spectrum?
Yeah,
but the general phrase of they knew, I want to know what you mean.
Yeah. So okay, I think it's all over the place. One, I think what you said previously, maybe it was Maddie, but saying that like a person at the top setting the corporate environment, right, the cultural environment, by like what happens, right, like it really does, like, fish rots from the head down, like it actually does matter how the leader like reacts, because then they let you know, okay, this is how I can react within this space, right, this is how I can behave. And now that's not gonna make a person who is respectful be terrible, but it's gonna make a person who never thought about these types of things, right, and just wants to go along and get along. It's like, okay, well, these are the type of jokes. This is what makes this crowd laugh. This is what I'm gonna do, right? And so yeah, that one time, and she was drunk and it was good, and I took her back home, like that kind of stuff, right? So there is that. But what I was really getting at was for these powerful men, and I'm not just talking about Andrew Cuomo in particular, right? I'm talking about like, just like, because these powerful men have a circle around them of people who just help them get shit done, right? Manage their empire. Right? A governor certainly has that in terms of their senior aides and their campaign staff, right? But like a billionaire casino magnate who may or may not have touched a massage therapist, right? I don't know. But they have their people around too. And these are the people they go to when things are happening. Now, you may not say, hey, I groped this woman, but if you're asking for help to like get rid of her somehow, like not like mob get rid of her, but like get this lady out of here, and then like she's making all kinds of crazy accusations, right? And if it happens once, all right, well, who knows? But if it happens again and again, and you're one of those people that they go to for these things, then you have an idea, right? If you are signing letters, right? Signing letters to discredit women who have these accusations, right? Well, I mean, you weren't there, but like you're calling into question this woman that you don't even know, and they're asking to do this. I don't know. That's another red flag. Now, hey, could be right. He could be exactly right in that it's a false accusations, but I don't know. It's another red flag. There is and there's like the woman who is like at first was perfectly fine interacting with this individual, but now is all of a sudden shy and wants to stay away and doesn't want to talk about it, right? Like all these things.
Wait.
Hold on.
Okay, sorry.
I'm just saying that all these things, they fall within that spectrum, and it's the culmination of all these things. So it's not just one thing, right? Again, unless he tells you, oh yeah, I groped her and she had a problem with it. I don't know what was the big deal, right? Like that could happen. But it's the culmination of all these things. So Andrew Cuomo has been doing this for a long time. You can't tell me that none of his fucking senior aides had any idea, right? That no one knew. No one had any
Well,
clue.
I mean, with
Right.
with the report, it came out like a lot of them were not only complicit, but like some of the women, especially what was it, like his top aide, like Melissa DeRosa, she like not only kind of knew about this, but she also perpetuated a super toxic work environment, where like she commented on women's looks and like was not a very nice person to women also. But sorry, Josie, I know that you probably have something more intelligent to
No, I
contribute.
I think I kind of lost it. No,
Uh-oh. Sorry.
yeah, it's okay. It was about the comment about the shyness. Wait,
Shyness.
no, sorry. Yeah, I'll think about it again. Sorry, I lost my train of
I'll
thought.
say it again. So the point was that like I'm giving like multiple examples of things that
Okay,
should
that
start
was just your last one of
raising
the
red flags.
multiple examples.
Yeah.
Okay,
No. It's
okay.
not like
All
someone
right.
has a change in behavior, right? And that's completely out of context. What am I supposed to? I don't know. What that could be about.
Right.
But I'm saying that these are all things that start to add up, right? Like and so I don't know. I feel like there were people, so there are senior aides who definitely knew, right? And then there are people below that, right, who are outside the inner circle who saw things, right? And what did they do? They might have done nothing because what the fuck am I going to do? Cuomo is
Exactly.
extremely
Governor.
powerful, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's that political thing,
Yeah.
right? Like all of a sudden you out a political leader. Well, guess what? Another political leader comes in and replaces all the employees with their friends
Oh,
and their
that's another thing.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so their whole jobs are on the line and a lot of times as well, which is again that power dynamic and that power thing is like, oh yeah, like where I could probably even imagine, and because I've worked in toxic workplaces where it was kind of really bad, it's like, oh yeah, you know, he's kind of touchy-feely.
Mm.
So he's gonna ask you if you're gay, and then he's probably gonna try to come on to you in some weird way. So just ignore him, right? And push him away like that, because that's the type of stuff that would happen,
Mhm.
right? It was just like, wait, why are you telling me this? Like, this is not good, right?
Mhm.
You know, and
At my first
Mhm.
job, I had someone like that where I was like put on a project with him, and they're like, I was pulled aside by multiple women independently saying, just a heads up, because I was 22, right? And they're like, he really likes to work with like the younger girls, like young pretty girls. Just like be wary of that. Like just be on your guard. Like like he gets a little like don't let him get handsy because he can get. And I'm like, and of course, at the time, I'm just like, okay, good to know. Like,
You need the
whatever. I'm
work.
like, right. But
You want
now I realize I'm like, they told me this, a warning as if it was helpful. But like, to me, I want to be like,
It's like a
well,
weather
then why the fuck
forecast.
wasn't this dealt with? Yeah.
It's like prepare for
Like,
rain.
Yeah.
It's gonna rain later. Like, you know, it's like bring your
right.
raincoat. It gets a cloudy out there.
It's all
I mean,
about
he was
power.
notorious. It is totally about power. Well, and I think in the case of Melissa DeRosa, who was like Cuomo's number 2, to call out his bad behavior would have then sacrificed her proximity to power. So,
It's all
like,
power.
mhm.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
I hate to be a stereotypical leftist as well when you were talking about how within like the sphere of people outside of that initial power ring is right. Like it's your job.
Yeah.
That's your source of income. That you cannot survive without your job, right? We live in a system where we are your healthcare, especially in the US, is intimately tied to your job, and you know. And you might then get a reputation within the business community, etc., etc. If you cannot, you're incentivized to not put that at risk by speaking out.
Indeed. No,
Yeah.
all those things. But even with there are people who like are outside the media organization, like who know these things, right? Who aren't tied and who don't have a status that puts them at risk, right? Where like the cost to you, right? Well, it could be some financial, but it could also be that there's that social cost. Is that you were the one, right? That broke like the vow, right? Like that kind of like the boys' club, like vow of silence, where like you
ruined the good thing.
Yeah.
You ruined the thing.
yeah, and it's like that alone will keep people from saying anything, right?
Are
Not
you
the
talking
victim.
about the allies, or are you talking about the people who are victimized?
Not the victim. No,
Because
no,
those
not
are
the
two different
victimized. No,
things.
not the victimized. No, not them. No, I'm talking about.
Okay, so you're saying the people who are gonna call somebody out at work or call out their boss that saw something?
So I'm talking about people outside of an organization, right? So not everyone, like who knows these things, right? And again, I'm not just talking about Andrew
That's
Cuomo.
harder.
No, I know. Hold on. Listen. Like, I'm not just talking about like Andrew Cuomo. I mean, talking about people who aren't under a powerful person engaging in this behavior, right? Who know, right? Like maybe they're actual friends, for instance, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, like, you're talking about, like, the donor circle, the people that they go to fancy parties with, just the patrons, those people. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just as sleazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just as culpable. Like, I can't stand that circle. Like, I know exactly what you're talking
Mhm.
about. And, like, those people who are like, oh, those are the people who are always going to those pool parties. Those are the people who are always donating large amounts of money and, like, going to fancy little shindigs with each other all the time and stuff like that. And, like, that crew is also very dangerous because a lot of times it's they kind of like silently confirm, and they just
They
know what's going
totally
on. They're like
they
little
val
leeches.
and by not saying anything, they're just validating that behavior.
Yeah.
It's almost like a wink and a nod, like it's fine because we're on the ins. We are the like we're part of the same club. And it's
So
fine. Or they're just
And there's also
so
again.
I
Go ahead.
I want to share this really quickly. So when I was pre-transition, right, like I presented as a cis male, and one of the things about it is I was invited to places because I was in politics, right? So I would then go to parties where these individuals would be, and the way that they talked made me so creeped out I would eventually just leave. Because it's like, it's kind of like the idea of like the good old boys club and you're not in it. And it's like in the way that you have to like gain cred was just like it was just slimy. They were just a slimy group of people. And it's really hard to put your finger on it because it's like one of those things exist in politics. But like when you're actually in those rooms, you're just like, ew. Like, it's like
Could you give me an
this is
example
real.
as to what you're talking about?
Okay. So like you go to a dinner and you're going with somebody who's like somebody who invites you to go, to this dinner, and all of a sudden like three or two other really powerful people show up randomly. And then there's like a massive donor and like other people that are like very connected with them for like decades. And then they like start talking about their past escapades to a point where it's just like, like, like it's like that boy culture of like, I'm gonna tell you about the times I did these things and these things. It's like the way that they kind of like connect in that like that really skeezy brotherly love. And it was just like, okay, I'm done, I'm out of here. Like I gotta go. Like this isn't my crowd. But yeah, it exists. Like those little freaking gross little circles that people think politics has in them, they exist and they're disgusting. And it
Yeah.
is a point where if you say something about it, like you say who was at that table, like it's like it really is not like real death, but like political death,
I think
like career
In
death.
professional sports, it's the same thing.
I think members
Same
of the
fucking
press also, have been complicit. Like, no one knew, no one said anything. And again, I'm not just talking about the this particular situation, right? But these other situations, right? That like there's multiple women, and there's like these rumors, right? It's like the one that Maddie was talking about, where people are given instructions on how to behave, right? No one hears about this. No one. Right? I feel like it's a part of his access journalism. Don't want to rock the boat, or because I won't be able to get that big scoop. Especially if you, it's one thing if you have like a silver bullet, right? And like I can take this guy down, right? But if you have anything less than that, right?
Well, it's Prime, you're 100% right, because when my story had to come out, I had to wait And the only reason I did, because it was like I thought I was the only victim, and then 4 showed up.
Mm.
And then I was just like, oh my God,
Mhm.
like I can't let this happen anymore. I'm going in, right? And that's kind of how that all happened, was because it's like a lot of victims are just like, oh my God, this is probably just me. They just want to internalize it, because when you don't say anything, you're just like, you don't want to be guilty of not saying anything, and then somebody else gets victimized and somebody else gets abused. So you're absolutely right, especially in a huge political context where you actually have elected officials in office, right? Like that silver bullet is what you have to do. And you can only do it usually when you have a cavalry of victims, unfortunately, that have to step for survivors, really. People that are survivors have to step forward with you to be able to take out that problematic individual, right?
Yeah.
So it's really it's a lot, Prime. Like, having to go through that and do it politically. I did it as a Jane Doe. But at the end of the day, like, everybody knew who it was, because all you had to do was read the description of who the person was, and everybody effing knew who it was. And having to live through that, having to go get dragged through that the worst part of it, where you're like, oh my God, people are going to try to cancel you, try to ruin your political career, try to ruin your credibility, to say it wasn't actually what it was, and like having to draw that string out, like unraveling that sweater till you're basically just nude in front of the whole world. And it's a really, really terrifying, terrible experience. I'm glad that it's over, because if it didn't, I would still be living with this darkness in my soul. Because but it was one of those things that had to happen. And what's infuriating about the whole thing, the person's still in office, because there's no mechanism to remove them from office. So we're waiting for their term to come out, go off, and that's kind of how that happens. Now, they didn't run for city council because they knew they'd get crushed, but still,
Yeah.
it was one of those things where it was like, wow. And that, and I was male bodied back then, so I had to deal with the whole idea of people trying to delegitimize my survivorship, because how can a guy get to go through this?
Yeah.
I swear to God, I don't know how I didn't come out as trans that year. I came out well, I guess I came out shortly that next year, but because
Wow.
when you're getting articles written about you about how can a man be a victim of the Me Too movement this way? How is it very people literally said this is too textbook of what would a woman would do. So how is this actually happening to a man? And I'm like, well, I am a woman, right? But the thing was, like, people would characterize my behavior, how I dealt with the situation, as very feminine, and that I was a woman. And the way that I did it was like a woman, so therefore how could it have been true, because I was a cis man, right? And so that was very hard too. But there are so many things, Prime, that are just layered on this stuff, because it was a complete emotional minefield, and I had it with the backing of 4 other survivors. And I was able to be a Jane Doe. The media was nice enough to keep my name out of the headlines, but there was one news article that was very descriptive of my job, and I was very upset by that, because that was
Yeah.
just like, well, you might
I'm
as well just have said my name at that point.
In my
I'm
case, oh, Amanda, go for it.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, no, sorry that happened to you. I was, when you said that you had the training with California's Democratic Party, I was actually surprised, because like Iowa Democratic Party does not have a sexual harassment or harassment policy for its members or volunteers or anyone involved in Iowa Democratic Party. We have a current senator who ran. He's actually my senator in Iowa, and he ran for governor and was accused of sexual harassment. Ended up dropping out like 2 weeks before the primary, which people had already voted and whatnot. So I actually was planning on running for office and primarying him. I had my website ready to launch, just kind of getting all the logistics, because there's a lot of stuff that goes in between launching a campaign. but I had also finally decided to report my boss at the time for sexual harassment and ended up getting fired. So, yeah, I ended up not running simply because I couldn't imagine how the media would be like, oh, look, she made this story up just so she could run against this guy and blah, 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 blah. And so, yeah, there's so many factors, and not even like, I mean, just getting fired in general is pretty confidence
They
blowing.
would have said that. They would have said that because they said that about me when I ran for Congress.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. It's
yeah.
you have to take in so many factors as a woman running or really doing anything, even just safety precautions. But yeah, there's there's a lot to be done.
Yeah, I mean, it's so this is like in the world of politics, and I started my career working in professional sports. And as you can imagine, the world of professional sports can be so fucking toxic. And that was where they had that guy who got handsy and like had a reputation for preferring to work with the pretty like younger new girls that were whatever to the organization. And the reason it wasn't dealt with more seriously was because he brought in a shit ton of money for all of the teams, because he was one of their like sales trainers and was like a really good sales trainer, because I worked for the internal consulting division. And like so they were reluctant because they're like, oh, but we don't want to lose him to another league, because then they are gonna get his like expertise, whatever. And like that, it was fucking infuriating. And he wasn't the only one. Like there were other people that I worked with throughout the course of whatever, like the 6 years I worked in professional sports, where it was just explained away like, oh, it's not a big deal. And the women, especially women at the top, it was this sort of mindset where it's like, you know what, I can hang with the boys, it's fine. So I don't take it seriously, because that's what you got to do to get to the top and climb the ladder. And it's just like that, like that fucking burden isn't placed on my male counterparts who do half the work I do.
And that's
and like
really interesting.
don't have to put up with this bullshit.
And that's really interesting, because I think I'm the idea of those women at the top, right? Because I've never been a woman in that position, so this is all my speculation. So but like, one, it's like I made it here, right? So why can't you, right? So like if this is just the way things are. So why are you complaining to me about this, right? And then, secondly, right, if you admit it's wrong, then you might have to admit that you were a victim of it too, and you don't want to look at it that way. And so this definitely isn't the problem. Maybe you're the problem, Maddie, like telling me this, right?
Oh yeah, no, and like I noticed this. I noticed there's a difference in people. And like there were two types of people I came into contact with, especially women. There were women who are like that, where they go through a bunch of shit but rise through the ranks, whatever, and they're like, well, I had to go through that shit, so you know what, and I got here, so you're gonna have to go through it too. It's a rite of passage, and it shows that you're like tough enough, whatever. That's one type. The other type is someone who goes, I went through such bullshit, I want to make sure that no one has to go through any of that ever again. And I found myself, I couldn't understand how people didn't have that mindset. But, learning over time, it's like, oh, a lot of that's just internalized misogyny, and also like not wanting to view yourself as a victim, because admitting that you were a victim somehow, like, I don't even know, like it makes you feel, it makes you weak, or like you don't deserve what you got, or you don't want to see yourself as a mechanism perpetuating this really negative thing that's pervasive within the industry and within your work culture. So yeah, I just like, I remember identifying like the differences between those two types of people, and it just made me that much more determined to like do everything I could so that no one else went through that. And that isn't just for like harassment and that sort of thing. It was just everything at work. Like when we had a new employee coming in, making sure they had literally everything they needed, and so they didn't feel out of place. So they had someone they could go to. And like, I just think that lack of empathy is really evident. And so, I mean, it sounds like politics, it's something that transcends industries.
Yeah, exactly that. So I guess we can, unless someone else has something you want to add, we can move on to
I was
next.
just gonna say
Go ahead.
I would
that's
also just like to
likely
say
because
I
of
am always the problem. I know you said that before, but
I was just gonna say that yes, with politics, it's because of the power structure. Definitely, people know their place really well.
Okay. Thank you.
oh wait,
Okay.
I'll save it for my ending statement. I was just gonna say that culture starts at the top, goes from the top down. That's how you at an organization like set the standard for what is acceptable and what's not. So if those at the top aren't living the values and reinforcing what behavior is okay and what's not, then of course it won't filter down because power dynamics are a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's get into it. All right. But thank you all for that. All right. So, next topic. The the ex-gay movement consists of people who formerly identified as LGBT, or at least felt urges to be part of that community, but have now converted to being cis-hetero, usually, though, through the power of prayer. These days, conversion therapy is often considered a form of abuse. But how should the pro-LGBT movement deal with converts? If someone says they are ex-gay, should their stance be respected? And if so, does that not prove their point that being gay or trans is a choice? So I went through this last week. We got a little distracted, a little bit. I'm excited to get into this. Oh, and just quickly, if you've just come to the channel, if you've been enjoying what you are watching, hit that follow button right now. Make sure notification bell is on, so you know I'm going live. But hit that follow button if you've just stumbled across our channel. All right. So let's do it. We'll start with No Justice.
So let's get the first thing straight, which is an actual scientific factual basis, right? Conversion therapy does not work. It has not been shown in any kind of scientific testing that's been done in it. It has not been shown to in any kind of meaningful fashion change anybody's sexuality, right? There is some self-reporting that will show that some people will say they've changed sexuality, but when you actually look at the scientific studies around actual patterns of arousal, these do not change with conversion therapy. There is no scientific evidence to say that it works, right? Now, does that mean that anyone who's gone through conversion therapy is not forthright in believing themselves that they've changed, right? They may believe themselves that they've changed. So the worst thing that we can show, to be solidarity with these people, right? The worst thing we can do is be condescending and to tell these people essentially, we know that you're lying to us and we know what your true sexuality is and we're going to save you from that. That's not the way you win people over, right? Okay. Because I fully believe that people who've gone through conversion therapy who are showing, heterosexual patterns of arousal, they probably were already to begin with, right? Because that's what the data set shows. So we have to show compassion without being condescending to these people, and then give them the time and the space. If they want to rejoin the community, they can do. And unfortunately, we can't just force them out of the change in lifestyle that they've chosen through whatever religious kind of awakening that's been shown to them, right? Because a lot of these people will retain their own, their religious belief that they've gained through whatever thing they've gone through. They will continue through that, right? And it's very difficult to disabuse someone of that as well, right? If that makes sense.
Thank you so much. Alice.
You're switching the order up. You're making me confused.
The thing changes. People move. I don't know. Alice.
I was like, I'm just sitting here like, yeah, everybody else is going to talk first. So, this is the one that I found a lot more interesting. The topic is worded such that we're talking about this documentary, Pray Away, and we're talking about the people who have converted, the people who are no longer gay. But No Justice just kind of alluded to this. There are not people who are no longer gay. This is not a thing that happens. Conversion therapy does not work. The entire point of that documentary, I don't know if you've watched it, but the entire point of that documentary is that conversion therapy does not work. Every person in that documentary still is gay. Literally every person, including the main person who There's like one of the people who is like supposedly successfully converted. They identified as trans, and they disidentified as trans, and that's the success, right? That's the supposed success of conversion therapy that's shown off in that documentary. So no one in that documentary really is converted from being gay into being straight. And there are no real effects of conversion therapy making people straight. So the question that's posed here, what should we do about the people who are, suddenly turned straight from conversion therapy? There are no people who are suddenly turned straight from conversion therapy. They're harmfully and dangerously, like pushing down their actual sexuality, essentially. It's not a choice to be gay, but it is a choice to push that down and fake not being gay. That is a choice that you can make. It's just going to cause harm to you. And it's been shown that conversion therapy increases rates of suicide. It reduces mental health. There is nothing positive about conversion therapy. If you consider people pretending not to be gay as a positive, then okay. I mean, I guess that's a positive, right? Those religious people that want to, that don't mind higher suicide rates in gay and trans people, I guess they might not mind conversion therapy, but that's the end result of conversion therapy. It's not people who are no longer gay. It's people who are still gay and suppressing it, and very likely to commit suicide or just be mentally unhealthy. It's not a positive outcome. And the question of what should we do about those people, and does it show anything about being gay being a choice? It shows nothing about being gay being a choice, and we shouldn't ostracize those people. We should be cautious with those people just as we would anybody else that's not out yet, or might not be comfortable coming out. They're very similar to that group. They're pushing down their actual sexuality for a religious reason, or generally religious reason, but sometimes a social reason. There's a lot of stigma against being gay, and if you could magically turn off being gay, it would be a lot easier for a lot of people. If you could magically turn off being trans, it'd be a lot easier for a lot of people. But the fact is, you can't magically turn those things off, and conversion therapy doesn't magically turn them off. Conversion therapy that works is abuse. It's literally beating the gay out of you. That is the only effective form of conversion therapy, and it's because trauma responses tend to cause that type of rapid shift. And they don't successfully make you no longer gay. They make you suppress it really effectively. Again, suicide rates are really, really high in those people who come out of conversion therapy. So, like, this question just overall is just not really, the documentary doesn't show anybody successful from conversion therapy. I don't know of any successful conversion therapy cases. Every case that I know of turns out to actually either, sadly commit suicide or end up still being gay. So it's just not really it's kind of a myopic question in a lot of ways. That's kind of my opening about it.
All right. Thank you. Let's go to Amanda.
Yeah, so I agree with the others that statistically conversion therapy doesn't statistically work. There isn't, anything really positive to come out about it. So yeah, this topic was kind of mind-fucking when you started questioning things, especially like saying, like people are no longer gay or they're confused, because those are things that, are often said about the LGBTQ community. And I also think like sexuality is a spectrum and we often grow. So, well, I don't want to say they're confused. I don't know. I don't want to this is a really hard topic to dissect because I want to be careful with my words, and yeah.
Okay. Maddie?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm going to admit my bias here. I think that everyone's a little gay. But that's my bias. So from that frame of reference, I think the data and research is pretty clear that the notion that you can pray the gay away is not a thing. And it doesn't impact what you are aroused by. It doesn't, it really is trying to conform to this outdated, archaic moral standard that is like a framework grounded in Christianity and just, I don't know, like bigotry. So if someone says they're not gay anymore, I think what I'm going to interpret that as is, oh, you like both now. Great. That's bisexual, my friend. Because as it turns out, like if you were, it all just comes from shame. It's all this like the shame of loving people and being attracted to people that you're told you're not supposed to, and thinking that if you just ignore that very innate side of you, that somehow it's like fake it till you make it. Well, with sexuality, unfortunately, you can't fake it until you make it. That goes for orgasms too. Don't fake it. It's rude and it teaches bad behavior. So
This is true.
yeah. So I just think I think it's dangerous to put any sort of like information out there that claims that somehow there's a process that can remove any gayness from you. I think, and honestly, like even I don't think it's a choice, but even if it were a choice, if it's an adult, what the fuck do you care? So I don't think it is, but I'm saying if it were adults, the fuck do you care? Oh, and someone in my chat just said fake it till you straight it. So not a thing, guys. Not a thing.
Straightness is a social construct, guys.
Yeah, it's okay to be attracted to people of the same sex a little bit. If you're a dude and you see there's like very handsome dude, like it's okay to be like, oh man. Also, I thought I didn't like sushi until I tried it. So how do you know you're straight if you haven't even sucked a dick?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah, that's right. Straight guys, suck a dick just to be sure. Just find out.
How do you know?
I know.
Just gotta check.
You just gotta check.
Never know.
Right? Yeah. All right.
Check the box. If you don't like it, you're like, no, not for me.
Yeah. All right.
That's
Like suck enough.
I don't think you have to try it to know.
I
Any free ladies out there? It's like snatch.
if you suck enough dicks, then like you'll get like a vagina for free. You know, it's like you check it off in a card, like you punch it off like a Subway.
Like when you go to a sandwich shop, right? It's like.
All right.
That's how I got like 5 of my vaginas.
How do I get that? Like, I'd like to sign up.
I know, Alice. I didn't know about this either.
Yeah,
It's part of the rewards program. I'll send you the link.
Gotcha.
Okay, good. I've got a few little snaps to make.
The notion that, but yeah, like if you're gay, just live your truth. It's okay. It's okay. Jesus doesn't care. Jesus doesn't give a fuck. Okay.
Okay. Josie, I know you're chomping at the bit, so please.
Yeah, I pulled out the survey, of course. I was like, oh, I've got data on this. Here we go. So
Love
first, I agree that there is no ex-gay or straight bi, gay. Like we shouldn't let people try to claim the label of gay. They're just straight. Like they're not ex-gay, they're just straight. Be straight. Okay, cool. You're straight. Like everybody else. Don't try to be a special snowflake and say you're an ex-gay. You're just straight. Because that's kind of how they're gonna try to present it in that way. So it's like one of those things. So I do want to go over though the damaging effects of conversion therapy. So especially at least for trans identified folks on this. So 14% of all trans people when they're young get sent to some type of professional and some type of like a counselor, a therapist, a religious leader, a counselor, and that's all basically considered some form of conversion therapy, right? In that way. But the respondents has say this, and that the people who are in that 14% category are far more likely to be experiencing serious psychological distress, 47%, than those who have not experienced it at 34%, more likely to have attempted suicide, 58%, than those who didn't have that experience at 39. Still high for being a trans person, but I'm just saying it goes up by an order of magnitude. And then nearly 3 times as likely to have run away from home, according to the sorry, I'm missing rather than the 39%. Okay, there we go. 22% rather than 8%. Sorry. And then more likely to have experienced homelessness, 46% more likely than other trans people that doesn't have that experience, and are 18 more likely to have done sex work. It is psychological torture. It ruins people's lives. It can completely devastate them. And the fact that anybody, I don't care if you are a openly trans woman trying to come in and say, come into conversion therapy, that person is wrong. And what we need to focus on, for me and the way that I look at it, is ensure that this is all codified into law, where this is just blatantly illegal. So it doesn't matter who's trying to champion it for other people. It doesn't matter if they're gay, straight, bi, or whatever. They won't be able to override the law that says that conversion therapy is illegal. Now, one of the things that's really unfortunate about this is, like, Milo Yiannopoulos, who is one of those ex-gays, has actually started his own conversion therapy center. So the idea that this is a grift on his point, he's immoral, and we all knew that anyway. And honestly, the gay community, fucking straights, you can have them. Like, that's how I look at it when it comes to that type of thing. And I give him no difference. I give no queer person any difference if they're going to support conversion therapy, because they know better than anybody else. They have the statistics. They understand that. And I will fight to shut down every effing conversion therapy clinic in the entire United States. And I don't care what you are, who you are, if you're trying to do it. It's torture.
Sure.
Agreed. Open to the panel.
So I kind of want to approach that point because this is the point that always gets asked in this type of conversation. So should adults be able to choose something that has potential to harm them? So, conversion therapy can harm you, and it would have to be communicated. There'd have to be communicated that there is risk to it. But why can't an adult choose something that's going to harm them? Like, that's the principle we use in a lot of things. Even things that have some risk, we allow adults to choose. So why is conversion therapy different? Is it different?
Well, I mean, why would we don't let cults exist, do we? Or do we?
We do.
I don't
We
know.
We do, yeah.
Yeah,
We
we
do.
do. Yes. The only time a cult is not allowed is when it's expressly violent, when it's an extremist, violent organization that is, committing actual crimes. Otherwise, a cult is perfectly allowed. You're allowed to choose to harm yourself as an adult. You can't commit suicide legally. Those types of things are protected. Your life is protected, but you can choose to do stupid shit to yourself, and as an adult, you're allowed to do that.
Cults are the existence of cults are legal. You're right. However, if a cult is found to be abusive, granted the burden of proof is high, but like if there are signs of abuse, like that is not illegal. And so that's why I think like I would put something like conversion therapy, where in some cases you're hooked up to like an electric, where you get like buzzed and shocked when you're watching like gay porn, to try to like stop you from getting aroused by associating it with like a bad electric shock. Like I remember watching a documentary forever ago, but they talk through how fucking horrible these like conversion therapy camp whatever things are, and like it's like that it's straight up torture and not grounded in reality or science or like things that are possible.
Okay, so then what about BDSM? So the problem is that we allow adults to do things that can harm them. And this is the same type of thing. So like, and again, I'm arguing from the like devil's advocate side here a little bit. But I have researched this. So conversion therapy can allow you to develop essentially a trauma response that allows you to better suppress your homosexual urges. And it's effective at that. That is an effective thing. So you don't stop being gay, but you have better tools to suppress your homosexual urges. And if somebody who is an adult of sane mind and body wants to undergo this type of thing, why should we stop them from doing so? So, like, that's kind of the argument that always comes up here, and I don't think there's a good argument against it. Because if we allow bodily autonomy for adults, this is exactly the same. We allow
guess for
bodily
me,
autonomy in all
I
cases.
don't know if that's.
sorry,
I
I
don't
guess
think
it's
you
like
could go somewhere and
false
say like,
advertising. Yeah, I don't know. There's a difference between like agreeing to like self-harm or things that could be seen as harmful. It's another thing entirely if you are like a gay conversion therapy place or provider, whatever, and the things that you are professing to provide are not grounded in any sort of science or there's no data to back it up. So I can't like that, I think, is a difference. Because like in the case of cults, for example, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending how you look at it, there is like a religious exemption for like, oh, but this is just what I believe. This is my religion. But for a place that is explicitly saying they can cause you like what their therapies, whatever, can like cause you to no longer be attracted to a member of the same sex. Like, I don't know that would fall under religious
But Maddie, what
exemptions.
about homeopathy? Right? Like,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, I agree with that too. Like, I think in a lot of those cases, I think maybe if there were some sort of disclosure or something stating, like, that's why there's a difference between like being able to call yourself a medical doctor and someone calling yourself like
a nutritionist or a
doctor of-
dietitian. Dietitians are the ones who are
Right,
actually
exactly.
licensed. And
But this is the same. This is exactly the same. This is literally the exact same. Just put a disclaimer that says not approved by the FDA.
let's go to
Well,
No
yeah,
Justice.
but
Let's go to No
but
Justice, and then
homeopathy isn't
Amanda,
torture.
and then Josie. All right, go ahead. No Justice, please go ahead.
But your homeopathy isn't torture, though. Like, it's not like psychological abuse. I think the problem is that if you say, well, okay, adults can do what they want and they can seek out these people if they want to, this is legitimizing these institutions on like a cultural level, right? If you say, well, okay, well, you can go there if you want, we don't suggest that you do. We are legitimizing, torture institutions that perform torture, right? I don't think that's okay, and I think that is a poor cultural precedent for us to set.
So okay. With the homeopathy, and maybe I shouldn't place this under that, but someone can yell at me if they feel like it's unfair. But there are some weird, fucked up home remedies on Facebook that have been going around. One of them is drinking bleach. Right? That bleach is a cure-all for fucking everything, right? Or like having
Putting it in
bleach
your
Yeah,
ass,
because
by the
it'll
way,
kill
not
you and
drinking
then
it.
you won't have those problems
exactly,
anymore.
right? But I would say doing like that to yourself is torture, and more importantly, doing it to your kids. I've seen it done. So like that is I think torturous. So I'm just like comparing the two as to like what we allow people to do. So I guess let's put aside the kids for a second and more focus on a person doing it themselves, right? Like if we allow people who have bodily autonomy, to getting to Alice's point, and that way it's reversed to my screen, but to get to Alice's point, if we can allow people to self-harm, then why couldn't we allow them to do conversion therapy? So yeah, so No Justice. If you have something else to respond to, then we'll go to Amanda, then Josie.
Well, and again, so obviously, if you're self-harming, you're using, I guess, like an implement that has other uses, in the same way that bleach has another use, in the same way that something, I don't know, hydroxychloroquine has another use, right? Whereas the existence of an institution that specifically is there for conversion therapy, they only exist as an area in which you can torture people, right? There's no other thing, there's no other, like, ulterior, purpose for this institution's existence. All it is a torture institution that you are legitimizing by having it be legal, right? Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I just wanted to point out that like BDSM isn't abuse. There's a difference between like harm and abuse, and that's the difference with conversion therapy and pretty much anything else. The tool is the abuse, is the
Yeah.
harm, as opposed to anything else. But yes, BDSM is not abuse.
Let's go with Maddie. Oh, sorry, Josie. Sorry, Josie.
I was
But
like, oh, did I
Alice looks like she wanted to respond.
Oh, do you want to respond
to
first?
Alice.
Then okay, Alice, then Josie.
It's up
And
to
then
you guys.
It's, well, I don't know. You had your hand
Yeah,
up. It
but
looked like
whatever you want. Someone talk.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. I will. Calm down, Prime. I got you. All right. Anyways, it's about an order of like the magnitude of the harm itself. So the idea is, if we have statistical evidence that says that this may cause psychological distress and cause somebody to self-harm themselves, you have that material thing. You also have the fact, if a doctor, what Maddie was saying, if a doctor is saying I'm using proven science for something that isn't scientific and says I'm going to help you with science, if somebody's seriously suffering, like let's say they can't go into their family's home and they're just like, I need to go in and I need to cure the gay, and this person's saying they have a scientifically valid method, and that's abusing that patient and trying to sell them a bill of goods and then putting them through psychological torture on top of all those things. And I hate to bring it to this hyperbolic point, but we got rid of the institution of slavery, and it wouldn't matter if people wanted to be a slave. You couldn't do that. And so it really comes down to an order of magnitude. Now, if you want to be like, but the institution itself, it doesn't exist. You can't go into a store and say, hey, I want to be a slave, right? You can't do that because that institution doesn't exist. So therefore, the institution of this torture mechanism that has statistical data to show that a person is twice as likely to kill themselves if they go through it. And a lot of times, and I read this story from the survey, is actually pretty great. And it kind of leads on to the point, which was, this is from a trans person. I don't know this person's identity, but they took the survey and they said, I was kicked out of my parents' home. I ran out of what little money I had, and I had nowhere to go. My family offered to let me return to their home on the condition that I detransition and live as a man. I accepted it because I had no choice. And so when you have an institution that exists for these desperate people that are just trying to get back into their own lives and survive, that's where I say it has to be illegal, even for an adult, because even if they're 18 or 19 and that's their only place that they can go is home, I'd rather that person not have that family, not even have the option to detransition that person through conversion therapy. So that's where I draw the line. And that's why I think the institution itself should be completely removed.
Alice?
I guess my problem here comes back to the conversation. So first off, Amanda is right. BDSM is not always abuse, though it is abuse sometimes. But then it's just abuse, not BDSM. Anyway, as an adult, you can consent to doing things under BDSM that are going to make permanent changes to your psyche. You can consent to forms of master-slave practice that can cause permanent change or harm to your psyche. You can consent to forms of play that involve hypnosis that cause permanent change or harm to your psyche. And you can consent to these things. And these are relatively common practices under BDSM. Now, they come with disclaimers. They come with edge play. This is edge play. This is not something that you should practice if you don't know what you're doing. But people do it. And they are adults, and they can consent to doing that type of play. And again, I don't support conversion therapy, and I think we should ban it. But my problem is that when we talk about banning conversion therapy and we just say, well, it's bad, there's a lot of things that adults can consent to that are bad, that are harmful. You can smoke a cigarette or you can drink alcohol to excess, and it will cause you harm. But we allow adults to consent to things that can cause them harm. So that's my problem here, is I definitely can see 100% a reason to ban conversion therapy or reparative therapy for people who are underage, for people who are 18 or under who can't consent to these types of things. But if they can consent to other forms of harm, then how is this different? And we're not showing that it is different than other forms of harm that genuinely do, like smoking cigarettes or drinking. Those are forms of harm that are going, that you can consent to as an adult, that arguably under the same framework shouldn't be allowed. So that's kind of what I'd like to see an argument made for.
Yeah. Sorry, I just
Okay,
wanted to.
Amanda, you go first, and then I'll jump in.
I just wanted, so like the things that you were describing actually are like crimes. Like someone can't have, like if they were to, like, so here it says,
Hypnosis is not a form of crime of any
no,
sort.
so it says reducing a person to slavery, intentionally possessing or causing a person to enter into or remain in servitude is generally a crime. So like
Master slave dynamics aren't like that, though. Master slave dynamics are generally, even if they're 24/7, they're not entering a contract of servitude. They're an agreed upon, consenting relationship
But
between
the
two
issue,
adults.
but it's
but
not
the
an
person can still
establishment.
be yeah, and a
I
person
don't
can
care
still
about
be
establishment.
charged with assault or injury whether it was
Yeah.
consented to or not.
Yes. Yeah,
That's
that's
the
true.
difference. So, like with conversion therapy, there is no like accountability for any of the damage. I guess there's
Whoa.
not really accountability in regards to sexual assault either. So, but
Yeah, BDSM
I
would
think
be
you get
very,
my
very
point.
similar. Well,
Yeah.
I would say it's similar.
I think the way I differentiated, or that I would, was that this practice in general, or this harm that's being done, is rooted in bigotry. It is rooted in homophobia, and it is rooted in hatred of a protected class. So if we wanted to maybe view this from like a legal standpoint, it would be like, I wouldn't want there to be an organization or something, let's say, who would allow like people to be like, I don't want to be my race anymore. I want to be white. And I know there are things like that out there for like products, but if there was like an institution that's like, oh, we can pray the Asian away, or pray the black away, I think that's fucked up. And I think that is sort of, in my mind, how I would work the framework for why this is differentiated than something like BDSM, is that the entire purpose and intent behind this is crafted on a foundation of hatred and discrimination against a protected class.
But should I guess maybe getting to Alice's point, and Josie, I see your hand up. Don't worry. To get to Alice's point though, like, should that be necessarily banned though? So there's bleaching products for your skin.
I know.
Yeah. This is big in Asia, but like you'll find some of that here, and really fucked up, you'll find some people, darker skinned individuals like black people, or other brown people using them, right? And it's based on the hatred and all that, but like that's there's one thing to say it's wrong and fucked up, and it's on so many levels, but it's another thing to say that, okay, you are not allowed as an adult to do this, right? And those are two different things.
Well, that's a product, but is there like a spa you can go to
I'm sure.
that is like, we will?
Yes.
Is there
I'll send you some of them. Yeah, absolutely.
a transracial spa?
Yeah, I will send you some of them. There are spas that have lightning
Spas
treatments, 100%.
and vaginas.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we allow people to undergo
Labiaplasty?
plastic surgery. Yeah, labiaplasty,
Yeah.
exactly.
Gnarly stuff there.
I make a distinction,
was
but I
just
know
making a joke.
Josie's been waiting to talk, and she's smart.
So he'll go to Josie, and then No Justice, and then Amanda if she wants to talk as well. Go ahead.
Okay, so everything about this argument deals with the transfer of goods and services, of the idea like what can be publicly sold in the public square, and torture should not be able to be sold in the public square. Just like if you were like, I'm selling poison today, you're gonna eat this and you're gonna die, and you can't make a store that says I'm gonna do this because it's
False advertising.
illegal. Yeah, it's just like, so the idea is like, you yes, there will be like backroom like conversion therapies where like people bring their priest in and things like that because it's like black market conversion therapy. But what I'm talking about is like the institutional ability. You can outlaw things like FTC. That's like that's how you can outlaw goods and services. That's something that we can do. And when you know that something is a torture or something that is going to harm the general public, for the most part, is going to be illegal. And that's what we should be striving for, is to make sure that those medical services and therapies that we provide in this country are backed by scientific research and data, so they actually save people's lives rather than send them to the grave.
So Alice,
And that's why, like, for psychics, they have to have disclosures on all their shit. That's like, this is for entertainment only. This is not based in science. Like, do people still go to them? Sure. But like, there's a clear distinction so that it's not seen on the same level as like a medical doctor.
So, Alice, I want you to respond. I'm curious if you're going to have the same response to Josie that I was going to have. Go ahead, Alice.
I'm curious about what your response was, because this is going to be a rare case where I think we're going to be talking on the same side
I
of
know,
something.
right?
It's a rare case.
Okay, well, do you want me to say it
go ahead,
quickly?
go ahead.
Yeah, so Josie, you're saying that you can't sell a store where you sell poison, right? But you can sell alcohol, and I can drink myself to death. I can actually do alcohol poisoning, right?
You can do that. Yes, that is a thing that does exist. But I'm talking about you go and you're selling cyanide capsules, or you're literally
like
selling things. Exactly, it's not like that because it's illegal. You can't go into a suicide store.
No,
Like you
no.
can't go in and get the service of suicide.
What I mean
unless-
is that conversion therapy is not a one-way ticket to death like a cyanide capsule is. It's more like alcohol. For some people, conversion therapy does work for what they want. It doesn't make them not gay, but it does
That's
allow
not
them to live out.
true.
It does allow them to live out their lives in the way they want to live their life out.
They're still
so-
going through trauma and torture of going through
what?
the conversion therapy. What do you mean? So what?
So
You're
what?
hurting
They're
people.
adults. They're
we
adults.
don't want
They're adults.
people to be able to do that
They're
because a lot
adults
of
that
times
can
it's
consent
You
to it.
can't
But
pay
they're-
someone to
drink
break your
alcohol.
arm. That
So,
person's still
Alice,
liable.
Are you telling me right now that you can't be coerced even as an adult to take conversion therapy? Like
Sure,
the
of course
fact
you
of the
can. You can
matter
also be
is,
coerced into
but-
drinking
but that-
alcohol socially.
sure, but I'm talking about like coerced with like your own livelihood and life.
Yes.
To go to
Have you heard of
conversion
China?
therapy.
So do you know
I know,
about
but
China?
I'm just letting you know
No,
that
but listen,
coercion exists, so therefore
but
the practice should be
let's take a step
legal.
back for a second. So in China, there's a culture of social drinking in business situations. It's a mandatory requirement that you need to get drunk with the people you work with, essentially. And it's led to kind of like an alcohol abuse culture in China in higher end business situations. So should we also ban alcohol in China? That's my problem, is that we make this argument and we all agree that
That's
conversion
slippery
therapy.
slope.
We all
Yeah,
agree
I
that
don't know that I see the allegory there.
Yeah.
we all agree that conversion therapy should be banned. We all agree with that. But the problem is that we're not arguing among people who agree with us. We want to be able to convince the people who don't agree with us. And we're not making an argument that works for those people. We're making an
But
argument
the-
that
but the
works for the people that
argument-
agree with us.
Argument is that 50% more likely you're going to commit suicide.
Not effective. It's just not effective.
But that's
an
the
adult
truth,
can consent,
though.
but it doesn't matter. An adult
But
can
it's
consent to
like
this.
so the fact of the matter is there's people who think the vaccine is illegal, but they're not taking it off the shelves,
What?
right? They think the vaccine is like dangerous, right? So it's like the idea is like if you keep okay, I'm losing my brain. My brain just fizzled out.
That's fine.
I'm sorry.
Let's go to.
Sorry.
Let's go to.
But yeah,
let's
no,
go to.
I
Hold on.
think-
Let's go to No
Sorry.
Justice, who's been waiting. Please go ahead.
I did just want to make the point is that your guys are talking from the country that had prohibition, right? Like, we can have these discussions about whether these things should be legal. I was going to mention the fact that New Zealand have just announced that they are putting a blanket ban on conversion therapy. This is the country that is also on the way to becoming smoke-free. They are, if you are born after a certain year, you are not allowed to buy cigarettes point blank. To the point at which there will be a generation that's the last generation that's ever going to be able to buy cigarettes in New Zealand, and it's going to be completely phased out because they realise that it is better for society if they have fewer smokers, well, lower their public healthcare bill for starters, right? They realise it is better for society if cigarettes are not a thing they have in it, and I would agree on that same wavelength with regards to having legal conversion therapy for adults, right? Because I don't think it is good for society to have it there, and I believe it leads to bad outcomes and it legitimizes torture. Simple.
We'll go to Maddie and Amanda when she gets back.
Yeah, I think I see a common theme. I think if you tried to pay someone to break your arm, you say,
Isn't there
I'm
been
gonna pay you
chemicals that have been banned? Like
Sorry,
tons of
Josie,
chemicals?
you're not muted.
Rosie, Josie,
Oh.
Josie.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Maddie.
I was
Sorry.
like, I don't know.
Come on, Maddie, tell me, Maddie. Tell me.
Like, I don't know, but I'll look it up. No, but like you can't, like, if you paid someone like break my arm, and like that person would still be liable for it and could still be arrested, even if you're like, no, but I wanted them to. Like, that's not a viable excuse. Like, they would still be seen as liable if they just went and like broke your arm. And I think if we want to take seriously the psychological ramifications of going through something like conversion therapy, something like, as Josie mentioned, a massively heightened risk of committing suicide afterwards, lifelong trauma simply from that process. Like, that's real, like, physical damage being done. And I think that maybe is also a distinction I draw. And it's tough because people don't always view like psychological injury or psychological trauma in the same way that they view physical trauma and physical injury. So I feel like, I don't know, I think there's always going to be a certain contingent of people who seek it out because there's just a lot of shame and homophobia. However, I think it's on us, if we want to build a better society, to delegitimize it and like highlight that not only does it not work, it just causes people to fall deeper into depression and, for many cases,
But
harm themselves,
but
commit
Maddie,
suicide.
you can actually pay a person to break your limbs. You can pay a doctor to break your legs multiple times to gain a few centimeters in
A
height.
medical professional.
No. But
with a medically
hold on.
professional, with a
But
medical
why
reason
would
to
a
do so.
person want, like, unless there's some like some rare disorder that I'm unaware of, right? But why would a person need to go through the pain of having the limbs broken again and again, then rehealing, then breaking them again, right? Unless there's something psychological behind it, like I'm not good enough at the height that I am, and so I'm going to do all of this. I'll go through months of torture for a few centimeters, right? Like, there's something behind that too, but you can literally pay a person. You could say, well, it's a doctor, right? And it's therapeutic. Well, that's what they would say too about the ex-gay stuff. Like, oh, it's therapeutic, right?
But they're not a doctor.
They
But
can
the
be.
ex-gay stuff is not.
They
But
can
that
be.
should be, then
They can
I
be a
see that as
licensed
medical, then
psychologist.
that should absolutely be a medical malpractice.
Not if they're not advertising it as a medically approved, process.
But if
So
you're still a licensed doctor performing that service, that to me,
It's
I
not
think
sufficient
that's a
to get you.
loophole, and it should be I think that would absolutely constitute malpractice.
Yes, that's possible.
I'll-
But I do want to point one other important thing out. Is that you can absolutely pay somebody to break any limbs you'd like. Go get into a boxing match or an MMA match. So that's the thing, is that we allow adults to consent to harm in many ways. I can keep bringing up more examples, but we allow
Alice,
substantial
what
harm.
would you what argument would you use to convince people who believe in conversion therapy? Because I know we're saying a lot of problems and nixing other things. What argument would you use?
I don't think we have to
Let's
use
be
any
problem
real.
solvers.
Yeah, problem solvers is a good idea. I don't think we have to use any real arguments. I think we have to inform people. You can't legally restrict conversion therapy to people who genuinely want it and are going to consent to it, because they're going to get it. They're going to get it whether it's legal or not. They're going to get it through back channels if it's not legal. So that means that much more harm to them is likely. So instead of focusing on the legalization or delegalization of conversion therapy, you should focus on education, and you should focus on the fact that it doesn't work and the fact that there are significant risks to it. And you should essentially just acknowledge that some people are going to consent to it and some people are going to get fucked up from it. And there's nothing we can do about that. We need to educate people, and that's how we can reduce that effect. Education and explaining the position and making other people understand this position. It's going to be gradual change. Like, making it illegal is not going to stop conversion therapy. It's just going to force them to hide. And when they hide, you're going to end up with situations like that one school in New York State where for literally 30 years they abused children. You're not going to end up with a good situation. So making it illegal is not the solution here. Education is the solution here.
But should it be illegal for minors?
Yeah, sure. And you can argue that
Even if they
because
have parental consent.
Yes, yeah, and you can argue that because we do that for a lot of things. Now it's going to hurt some trans causes, right? Because you can make the same argument for HRT and so not hormone therapy like estrogen or testosterone, but even blockers can be harmful. to some extent, and children can't consent to harm. And if you make it so that you can't make this type of consent, then you end up in the same position. Anyway, point is slippery slope on that front. But yeah, no, I think you could make it illegal for children. Yeah, you could definitely do that, even with parental consent, because we do that. We have precedent for that. It fits into society already. A child, even with parental consent, doesn't have the ability to understand what potential harm is going to come to them. And of course, there's abusive situations that come into play there. Not that adults don't have that problem. It does happen. It's just that they're adults, and we treat harm in adults differently than we treat harm in children.
Also, I just want to point out that in a boxing match, if a leg or any sort of bone is broken, they stop the match immediately.
Of course they do, and they probably do that in conversion therapy as well.
And actually fix the person who got injured.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have read into.
out.
I don't know if you guys have read into any conversion therapy techniques, but they're not like you describe. They're not like, so the only real ones that have been effective, actually effective, are literally like abuse tactics, right? But they're not physical abuse generally, they're emotional abuse. They're generally tactics that cause suppression, tactics, techniques to come into play. They're essentially forcing PTSD symptoms onto people, but they're not physical abuse generally. They're emotional abuse. So it's a really slippery slope. And my problem is that when we just say like, well, we're just going to make it illegal. Illegal doesn't mean that it disappears. Look at the places where abortion is illegal and abortion still happens. This is exactly the same type of thing, except that instead of abortion, it's going to be, conversion therapy and back channels. That's way worse.
Do you have any data that shows that goes down if you make it illegal, right? Because I understand the abortion comparison you're making, but there are plenty of things that have gone down since you made them illegal. Like look at gun deaths in the UK, right? Since Dunblane and since the banning of handguns, firearm-related deaths fell off an absolute cliff, and the same in Australia as well. Like just because it happened with abortion, that making it illegal means that it doesn't stop them from happening, doesn't mean that's a parallel with conversion therapy, right?
So
right.
I do have some.
Because with abortion, when it's made illegal, more women die than if it were like actually legal.
And there's no such thing as effective conversion therapy, because if you're saying that the effectiveness of conversion therapy involves abuse, then that is not effective. Like the idea of saying that out loud is very irresponsible.
Personal effectiveness. So the thing about it is that your view of effectiveness is making them not gay anymore, and that doesn't work, right? We know that doesn't work.
So there is
hold
no
on.
effective.
Let me finish my thought.
That's not what she's saying.
Please let me finish my thought. So the problem is that effectiveness from your perspective would be suddenly turning somebody not gay, and we know you can't do that. But a personal effectiveness for somebody affected in this case could be just not kind of submitting to the urges that they're having, right? That is personally effective for them, and there are forms of conversion therapy that do help with that outcome. So they can be harmful.
But you literally said that the only way emotional abuse is still not effective.
Which you can consent to.
You can't say that like there is an effective way of doing conversion therapy because it's still abuse. You're still saying it's abuse. Exactly, that is abuse. No, but the thing is, we're trying to make it illegal. Like that's the thing. Like it's not like if you let the system and institution to exist, then doctors and therapists are still going to try to go and get those things. Like the fact of the matter is, you're talking about clinicians and clinical people trying to do effective conversion therapy because it makes their lives better, even though you're specifically saying that it causes emotional trauma to people, which is still just as bad as physical trauma. That is not effective.
I don't see the value in devil's advocate.
I lived in Texas in a very racist small town that I had no idea trans rights even existed.
I know a lot of people who genuinely would have benefited from something that was able to help them.
That's irresponsible, Alice. I'm not gonna feed that. That is bullshit.
That's fucking dangerous, honestly. Like even, and I know we're trying to play like devil's advocate with this and be like, oh, but what about people who don't agree with you? There's I'm sorry, this is fucking semi-validating something that causes people to commit suicide and that has caused irreparable harm with so many people. And like, I just think it's so fucking dangerous to do that. And listen, when we say we want to make it illegal, that doesn't mean that then we're wiping our hands clean and it's all better. Like, no, of course that comes parallel path with things like education, with things like advocacy, with things like fighting against systemic homophobia and people trying to shame people who just want to live with their real sexual identity and not be condemned for it. And the notion that, like, I don't know, maybe it's like a debate tactic where you go and you're like, oh, but like, what is harm? What is it? Like, we can have that like abstract debate, but like serving to further any sort of justification for this shit by caveating it with, oh, but I'm personally against it. That's fucking irresponsible.
Yeah, I can understand you feeling that way, but the problem is that we all agree with each other on this topic.
You
and we need to
literally
be-
said that you would have friends that would have benefited from some version of conversion therapy, Alice. That is not
Yes,
responsible.
I've known people. So the problem is that how do you help people like that? And my problem is that just saying make it illegal doesn't solve the problem that you have. So like I guess my only point here is the focus on just saying, well, conversion therapy is always bad and make it illegal and no one's ever going to benefit from it and it's never going to. You're right. It's going to cause harm to them, right? And so we should instead aim on education. But making something illegal for adults doesn't
Why not
cause
both?
them to stop seeking it. Making something illegal for adults doesn't cause them to stop seeking it.
But
And
why
that's the
not both?
problem.
Why
Regulate it
can't you ban
instead.
it and provide education
Regulate
for
it.
Should
why is
Regulate
that?
it and educate.
Regulate it, so validate it.
so
Regulate it and educate. Yeah.
so should
Validate it.
go ahead. Well, Amanda, you go first, and then
Yeah, in my opening statement, Alice, I actually agreed with you and with No Justice that conversion therapy statistically doesn't work, and I'm pretty sure that you said that there wasn't anything positive to come out of it.
Yeah, I would say
So
that.
I'm confused now because now you're saying that you knew friends that would benefit.
So if you live in a so let me preface this. So I think that there's two forms of harm they would have undergone, right? So I think the less of the two harms would have been suppression in this case. So when you are in a family where you don't have a way to support yourself, you don't have support systems, you don't have social support systems, there's not necessarily governmental support systems in place for you, and your family is going to disown you, then the ability to suppress these things actually will benefit you more than being homeless in a lot of cases. It definitely depends. My problem is, as an adult, like taking away options from people doesn't actually solve the problems that those options exist for. So I think that I agree with everybody here. Obviously, conversion therapy is not going to cause somebody not to be gay. It's not going to give them effective tools that are safe for them to not act on being gay or being trans, right? They're still going to be gay or trans, so those things aren't going to be effective in that sense. But it can potentially be an outlet for somebody who is an adult who is undergoing a significant amount of stress and harm otherwise in their life, for an outlet for them to move forwards with. Regulation of something like this can genuinely help that approach. Now, agreed here. Okay, so what does it look like if we just make it illegal? If we just say you can't do conversion therapy, nobody can do conversion therapy. What actually happens then?
You would ban the institution so people couldn't go into the public square and sell these services.
We already banned that in
It
a lot of
both
places.
it
know.
delegitimizes it, and where they've banned
Yeah.
it, like people are dying because of the trauma caused from these institutions. And if we want to look for examples where it's successfully done, then I would say, look, I'm excited to see what happens in New Zealand now, because I didn't know that they were banning it. And so let's look at places and see what the actual impact is. Let's see, for those who still pursue it in those areas, like, does it actually have the same degree of harm? Because I would bet my entire fucking life savings, which isn't a lot, but it's all I have, I would bet that people are largely better off and suffer less that in places where they have done away with conversion therapy and have made it illegal. It doesn't, again, you're right, that's not going to fix bigotry. That's not going to fix bigotry, but it also doesn't legitimize a fucking heinous dehumanizing process.
Obviously, I'm going to
Go ahead. No.
tend to agree. So
Yeah.
What I wanted to do, actually,
Go ahead.
I wanted to pull things back around to the original question that was being asked, where we're talking about how do we deal with the people who've been through this process, right? Because that was what the original question was regarding. Now, it's no surprise that the biggest proponents of it are the people who peddle the practices, right? The show people for these industries are the people who've come out of this process saying they are ex-gay or ex-trans, right? And obviously these are abuse victims, right? So it's not surprising that they are feeling so embedded in that process that they feel happy to market it to other people. Because if they didn't, they'd have to admit that it was wrong. And obviously going through this abuse process, they're going to have to go through some level of self-denial. How do we reach these people who are the people who are pushing this, abusive practice? How do we reach these people when we know that they're in this kind of abusive cycle, right? Or at least we can intuit that, I guess. We can't really know, but we can intuit it, can't we?
I think another point with like all the analogies with the arguments and stuff is that we have research on like how like abortion and access to it reduces harm, and we have research that conversion therapy is harmful. So yeah, I think we just need to reduce harm always and advocate for that.
Harm.
Yeah. So, but okay. So, Alice, this is weird for us, right? This is not our usual dynamic. But I'll say this. One, I think there's something to the argument about like the fact that it's legal legitimizes it in and of itself, right? And then making it illegal, and it's that by itself delegitimizes the institution. So I think that's actually quite interesting and an important point. That being said, from what I was seeing from Alice, is that she wasn't actually trying to validate this, right? She agreed with you again and again and again. It is a harmful practice, right? That it is torture, right? She never denied that it is what it was, right? But she was just exploring like what it is to have autonomy as adults, right? And like how we view autonomy in society in general. So, we're talking about harm reduction, right? Maddie, you just, or maybe it was Amanda, I don't know. But one of you mentioned harm reduction. Yeah, I know it's reversing your screen. It's very annoying. But talking about harm reduction. Well, when we talk about harm reduction in other fields, like for instance, drugs, right? Part of harm reduction is that we don't make it illegal. Right, like we decriminalize it, so that yes, there might be people who are addicted to these things, but we can give them help, and we don't run them through the justice system. Right, that's harm reduction. It's not actually keeping it in the shadows. It's actually allowing it to exist, but recognizing that the substance is harmful and giving these people help that they need. Right, so I think relating that back to what Alice is trying to say is that we educate people, right? Just like we will educate people saying that heroin is not great, like don't use heroin. But at the same time, we don't want to put you in jail for that. If you do use heroin, well, that's a medical issue, right? That's a medical issue, and we'll take care of it in that realm. Like Alice is saying that educate individuals, give them the power that they need to know that, one, this doesn't work. So if you're a parent and you're thinking maybe this will help my kid, well, it doesn't work in the first place, right? And you're just causing harm. You're not actually helping, because a lot of these parents, honestly, thank God, think that they are helping their children, right? If Alice would say, let's disabuse them of that. And I mean, and then like we like slowly chip away at it, right? And then the people who are ex-gay, then you put them in therapy, right? Like, hey, like you went through this thing, you were forced into it, or whatever, coerced. Let's give them the help that they need. But like simply banning it doesn't get rid of the problem of like the things that drive them to that conversion therapy in the first place. So, Maddie.
Yeah, so I think the difference with our drug policy, because I agree, I am a big proponent of decriminalization. However, in the case of conversion therapy, I would be against criminalizing those seeking the treatment, so quote unquote patients, but I would 100% be for criminalizing those who are providing it. Like that to me is a very clear distinction. Because like, look, I'm not going to fault someone or criminalize someone who for being born into a family who's bigoted and doesn't see their humanity or doesn't recognize and love them for who they are. I'm not going to criminalize someone for that. That would be insane to criminalize that. But I am going to criminalize people who perpetuate homophobia, who perpetuate that kind of hate and shame and literally make their living off of shaming gay men and women for who they are and that dangerous and just like inflicting psychological trauma. That's sort of where I would maybe draw a distinction with that particular allegory.
Okay, fair enough. But No Justice was trying to do something important and bring us back to the original topic. And I'm not sure how well we've actually explored that part. Like, okay, so people say that they're ex-gay, right? So they say, and they're abuse victims. Got it, 100%. Well, we all agree on that. But if someone, yeah, this is where I wanted to take the conversation originally. I didn't know we were going to go down this route. But if someone identifies as saying that they're ex-gay, like, who are we to question them, right? So, like, because the research says that's not a real thing.
It's anecdotal. That's how.
It doesn't actually.
I don't want to say the next sentence because
it
you guys can get
doesn't
mad
like.
at me. But
No, it's like, but they say like people that identify as that, like they don't actually they don't find themselves actually attracted to different people. Like that was, I think, and No Justice brought this up in her in their opening statement, where it doesn't actually impact like who they're attracted to. So maybe you can say you're an ex-gay, like Mayo, last name insert here, but like I don't know. To me, that's more of a signal that there's a lot of like self-hatred and shame versus actual identity. But I also don't necessarily think of the people I interact with by like who they prefer sexually.
No, I mean, fair enough. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, in terms of the LGBT movement, right? If a person is saying this works for me, like, just what should the movement do? Like I can relating this back to our previous conversation, right? And those women who have gone through maybe traumatic experiences in like the all boys club, right? And who have said to themselves, well, I'm not a victim and this is just how it is, right? Calling them an abuse victim like pushes them away, right? Like, of course I didn't suffer any abuse, right? You're just soft. That's the problem. So relating it to this, it's like if someone approaches you and they're saying that they're ex-gay, right? Like saying that you're an abuse survivor when they don't view themselves as an abuse survivor may not be the best way to reach them, right? But at the same time, let's say, okay, an ex-gay person insinuates themselves within a LGBT community. At this, they could also be doing active harm, right? Because like, was it No Justice? Someone said something, but someone said a good point about like how like the biggest proponents of it are the ones who have gone through it themselves. You know, maybe abuse survivors, but they might be.
That was me, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Good work. But they might be pushing abuse themselves, right? So like, oh, it worked for me, right? Like, gay youth, right? It worked for me. It could work for you. So my question is, should we the LGBT movement, should they push ex-gay people away, right? Or should they try to bring them in and say, well, this is something that happened to you. Maybe you should recontextualize your experiences. Yeah. And for many time, I'm curious if we can try for that.
Why is it like exactly on the movement, I guess, and not just starting to be education, general knowledge, teach people these things, and it just be something that everybody does, not just the LGBTQ community.
Because everyone's not going to do it. Because everyone's not going to do it.
That doesn't mean the LGBTQ community is either. I guess I don't know. Like we're like blanketing everybody under this umbrella, and I think.
Well, I'm not saying every person who happens to be gay. I'm talking about like the movement activists, right? Like this is what I'm imagining in my head. And maybe I didn't make that clear, but like not like every person who happens to be a man and like other men needs to be educated on this and then to be able to fight against it. Like no, but like activists, right? People who are part of the movement, right? Just because you're black doesn't mean you're part of the civil rights movement, right? Those things are two different things, right?
People as part of our community are the people who are going to be the targets of these conversion therapists, right? These are people who we have to be able to be there to defend.
Exactly, because it's used to weaponize against us, and that's why that's why a lot of queer people get really salty about this, because we know people who are abused by these things and people have lost their lives. Like this is real human cost. So this isn't somebody just like that's the whole idea. It's like you can't frame a form of abuse that has led so many queer people to their graves as any form of what do you call there's no way it can be effective in any way at all.
So we're kind of just moving away from that part. No, but
I know, but I'm just saying, like it's dangerous because it puts people in their graves.
Sure. I think like the way that the movement should be is first, I guess maybe reach out, have these conversations with people. I don't know, like I think completely invalidating them is pointless.
Okay, that's where I was going to get to. Yeah.
The question. Yeah. The question is, do you just take these people and say, no, you are gay. You think you're ex-gay, you're wrong. Or do you
definitely not.
Right. No, I've talked with people before and I've convinced people of like things before, and that's a very poor tactic for any sort of persuasion. Is to just like confront them like that. I think just providing a space where they feel safe, with however they choose to identify. Like, listen, I had friends in college who were not out yet, but like we all kind of knew, but no one was going to force them or say, no, you have to identify as this, you have to identify as this. All we could do is just be good friends and treat them with respect and dignity and like cultivate an environment where they felt welcome and accepted. And then should they choose to identify as whatever, that's fine. That's their choice. I would draw the line though if that person were also then advocating for other people to like go to conversion therapy, or if they were like advocating against, they were like homophobic and like advocating against anyone who is LGBTQ plus, because that is then doing harm. But if it's just their own identity, I leave that up to them. Like that.
Go for it, sorry. Yeah. I was going to say, because these people have probably grown up and lived around or been, they've been in communities that are hostile to LGBT people, right? That's what usually these people have grown up in. It's what they've always known. And so they're never going to find a good outlet with which to be able to find their way back to them true selves again if they continue in that particular environment. If we give them a non-condescending, open environment and say, look, whatever you want to however you want to identify to yourselves, to us as, that's fine, we won't judge you either way. And then they come and spend time around people who are queer, who are gay, who are trans, who are happy, who don't have this constant cloud of fundamentalism pushing them away from their true sexuality, right? I think they're more likely to come around to, accepting themselves than if we are condescending and we say, no, we know you better than what you're telling us, right? If that makes sense.
By accepting themselves, though, do you mean that now that they are identifying as straight, are you saying accepting themselves as straight, or are you saying accepting themselves as secretly gay? Like, that's part of the problem of the question here.
Accepting the fact that they have they are, they have innately homosexual urges, right? Which is, again, we've already discussed as part of this, people's sexuality is innate as far as the studies from scientifically showing that conversion therapy doesn't work, right?
But then your answer is that you're denying their own identity. You're saying that they're not actually straight, that they are gay.
But I don't really,
think
I don't
everyone's
really
okay.
subscribe to the idea that this identity is somehow different than the actual
Yeah.
sociality that we ascribe to the way in which they experience their sexuality.
Well,
If
okay.
they're sleeping with women and they are a guy and they are married to a woman, and now you're essentially saying, well, they'll feel comfortable eventually.
They're straight.
Then we're denying their identity, right? We're saying they're not actually straight. They're secretly gay because they went through conversion therapy and secretly they're gay. So that's the question here, though, is like, are we
Just, like,
saying
don't-
that or?
I just like
I
don't
would-
talk to the people I'm friends with about like who they're fucking.
So
Yeah, I mean,
That's-
yeah,
like
but
I don't
Base?
know.
yeah, I know,
that's
but I
just
mean in
not,
terms of
like-
the movement. But like, okay, look. So
But
a
They can, just
person.
form they can just form their own movement, and if it becomes
don't
big enough,
ask.
then the LGBTQ community can respond then.
So if a man in prison sleeps with other men, comes out of prison and says he is straight, is he wrong for saying that?
no, because the self-identity is enough. You can say like
Okay.
you're straight, you're straight. If you're saying you're ex-gay, then you're straight. Like I just don't like the
Okay.
labeling gay. Right? Like it's their identity. It's whatever they say they are. Like I am very, very clear on that as even like a LGBTQ researcher. It's like it's self ID. Like you don't go around and like this person's acting gay, so I'm gonna say they're gay.
Okay.
Like you don't do that if they're gonna out them and things like that. So people will come out and have their identities and switch it around and do all those type of things. But like for me, it's like that's really for me, it's like it's whatever people want to identify as, I guess. If they want to say they're straight now, then they can say they're straight. But the ones that say they're ex-gay are doing it for attention too, because they want to be ex-gay instead of straight. You're just straight. If like you were gay curious, bi curious, whatever, you're straight. Fine, you're
But-
straight.
Yeah, you're
You
not
say
like straight too straight,
Yeah.
too furious. Like no, you're
No,
just
I
straight.
disagree
I wanna
here.
Guess
Back
what?
on the
I'm an
attention,
ex-straight. I'm an ex-straight. I need to identify as an ex-straight now.
But they're doing
because I'm
that
an
for a
ex-straight.
reason, though. But no, there's
I
actually.
feel like that's an activism type. Like
Yeah.
they think they're doing something right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say necessarily like attention, especially when we're dealing with people that have been in abuse situations. I
I
that-
think of Milo.
Yeah, I think. I mean, from their perspective, they were advertising that this is a thing that can happen, right? Like I was in your situation too, right? I thought there was no hope for me, but I went through this therapy, and here I am, right? An ex-gay, meaning I'm straight. So like if it's self-ID, right? If that's what you're saying, which is fine, okay? But self-ID, then we admit then we just say that they're straight, right? Like then, because the way it's framed previously is that, well, that's obviously they're not, right? They're obviously not, but they are saying that they are, right? Like if it's self-identification, then that person is straight. Who has gone through the escape program, that person is straight.
Sure, like that works for self-identification. However, if that like what happens with a lot of these people, especially prominent men, where they like continue fucking men even though they profess to be straight, it's like, look, I will still take you at your word, but like be honest with yourself, my dude. But again, like I've had friends who like they struggle with their sexual identity. I also had friends who struggled with their gender identity. And so really my like thing that I held, I was like, look, I will refer to them as whatever they prefer. But again, if in the case where it's like ex-gay, whatever, if that then leads to them advocating or like condemning homosexuality or like pressing other members of the LGBTQ plus community to like do conversion therapy or other things, I draw the fucking line because that is harmful and fucked. But if someone wants to identify as whatever, I respect their own identities, because like at the end of the day, I just like don't talk to people about who they're fucking.
Yeah,
like
I know.
and
But like
talking
the
about.
point is like because like there's a problem of, and we were discussing this fucking yesterday, right? The problem of like the non-binary community. like a lot of people are identifying as non-binary, and it's for the public, right? The public doesn't know what to do with this, right? Like like you're saying you're non-binary, but like I see all the gender cues that you had previously, right? So I'll respect that you're what you said. You said you're non-binary, but like, are you really non-binary in my head? Like, am I just like humoring this person? So are we humoring these people? And I don't mean to say that non-binary people are the same as ex-gay
Prime,
people.
what did you
No,
just
no, 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 no,
say?
no. But no, I'm not trying to invalidate them. But I'm saying that if you're self-identifying as something that can't be visually confirmed, right? Like I can visually
What?
please listen to me. Like don't just
Okay.
treat
Passing,
this
you mean?
as a charitable argument. I can self-identify. Sorry, no, I can identify Josie as a person, you know, who's gone through transition, right? Who like, is a woman, right? So that when you're telling me, Josie, that you identify as a woman, okay, great, right? But like when you say like identify as non-binary, and I don't fall into these gender norms, but like the public sees you as like a woman any which way, right? Like you're still putting all those same gender cues, right? Like people, and I'm not saying I do this, so please don't yell at me, okay? I'm
Because
saying
you said I a second ago.
okay. So I was using like the first person voice to do this. Sorry. All right, let's just use the
Okay.
third person voice. The
Okay, thank
public
you.
and the public, right? Can might say, okay, sure, I guess you're non-binary. I don't want to like say anything rude to a person, but as the public, I maybe I'm just maybe they are just humoring this person, right? Rather than actually believing that they are this thing called non-binary, right? So
Okay.
so relating
I'm
that
gonna
back to
speak because
this.
I'm an expert
So
on this.
yeah,
I'm
sure,
gonna speak because
sure.
I'm an expert
Okay,
on
great.
this.
So
Okay.
so hold on. Let me finish
Yeah.
let me finish my sentence. So relating
Okay.
that back to ex-gay,
Alice,
right?
you can laugh, but I'm actually a scientist. Okay.
Relating this back to
And I want to
ex-gay.
make a quick point
Hold
before
on,
that,
let me finish
please.
finish my sentence, please. Thank you. Great. Relating this back to ex-gay, right? Like, are we saying that these people are straight, or are we humoring them, right? As well, oh, you're actually gay, right? Or are you actually a woman, not actually non-binary? So, Josie, go ahead, and then Amanda.
All right. And first,
Wait,
I would like to. What, Amanda? Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, sorry. I just wanted to say that identity isn't an excuse. Or sorry, accepting someone's identity is an excuse to someone's behavior. So like, when someone advocates for harmful shit, they can be called out, and we can do that without being an asshole. Um,
Yeah.
but that's all
Okay.
I wanted to say. Oh, also,
Okay.
Prime, you asked that question like 12 times
What the
while you were
question?
talking just now. Now I don't even know it, and you
I'm
asked
sorry.
it the whole time.
Okay, so I need to re-explain why I said that I'm an expert on this. I'm actually a researcher. I research in trans communities, and I actually am the project manager for the U.S. Transgender Survey, and am working with the National Center for Transgender Equality. So, I mean, I felt like laughing at me saying that was quite interesting. Anyways, um, okay. So Prime, the idea of like non-binary identities and the way that these are starting to manifest is still fairly new
Mhm.
in the way that we are looking at the research. In fact, the Williams Institute just released a meta-analysis recently on non-binary identities, where they actually made a delineation between trans non-binary people and not trans non-binary people. That there's like the umbrella term of like trans, and then the non-binary umbrella is like halfway underneath that umbrella. That is what research is starting to say,
Mhm.
but we still need to do more research on that topic.
Mhm.
So it's something that is still being researched this day on what that experience for that non-binary person that still presents as the gender that they were assigned at birth versus what they are, you know, presenting or what is perceived as non-binary. Another thing about that is like the idea that you have to be like performative in some way can be very dangerous, because some people don't have access or resources to those things. Some people have medical conditions that force them to not, do that. There is, and then some people feel like their gender identity may not feel like women sometimes, but never feel like man, but not feel like woman, right? So therefore, those identities can change in the way that a non-binary person presents. So we're not telling non-binary people that we're humoring you, even though that you don't look non-binary or look like the gender that they're transitioning into. The reason that my transition looks the way that it is because I have severe gender social dysphoria. So I want to be perceived by everybody around me as a femme woman. That's just who I am, and that's how it manifests for me. But every trans woman or trans person and trans person experience is very different and has a whole kaleidoscope of issues. So it's not a humoring; it's an actual identity that people are taking on. And a lot of non-binary people who do still present as the cisgender that they were born at birth, they may not be so offended when they get she heard, right?
Yeah.
They may say, oh, I'm actually they them, but they understand that they're humans. They get it, right? They know that there is a level of understanding that you may have to know that person in society. We still live in a society, right? We still have to deal with the bullshit transphobia where people just say, hey, how are you, what's your pronouns? People just automatically assume, and we still have a long way to go before we get to that point in our introduction.
So
So going back to your initial question about, are we humoring these ex-gays? For me, if they want to identify as straight, then they're straight. And it's not humoring, because in my opinion, it doesn't affect me because it's a personal life choices. Whoever they sleep with is their choice. The place where I draw the line is where they go into our communities and try to hurt us with conversion therapy, or trying to make it seem like gay is a choice, and then sparks and goes right into the right wing machine that then churn out talking points that attack our community. That's where I draw the line for anybody, regardless if they were, LGBTQ plus or not. So that's where I draw the line. But if somebody wants to be gay one day and then say I'm straight and sleep and marry a woman or a man and just be that way, then more power to them, just the way I would say it to a queer person. But I draw the line where it starts to affect our community and our rights as people.
So okay, and I will go to No Justice, and we're gonna end very quickly, and then we'll go into open walk on panels. The stream does not end when we're done here. Okay, so we'll have more content afterwards. But Josie, so I agree with you, right? And thank you for providing that information on the non-binary category. So that's very important. But I'm saying the only point that I was trying to make is that the public does not understand, right? Like that's the part of the education. Like we got to educate the public on this situation, right? But the public, a lot of people who aren't ensconced in this, right? Who don't dig into this, they don't understand. So when they're saying, okay, all right, this person's saying they're non-binary, they might simply be humoring this person, like, okay, sure, all right, whatever, okay, this is what they want to identify as, sure, but they don't actually recognize that as a real thing. So that's why I was trying to relate the two together. But yeah, not saying that I'm invalidating the non-binary, status, but just yeah. So okay, No Justice. You are muted, buddy.
Things, the way we use words to describe gender and the way gender manifests is entirely socially constructed, right? We all agree on that. But the thing is with sexuality, or maybe the way we describe sexuality, the way we use words to describe sexuality is socially constructed. But patterns of attraction that people have, which is what people have been measuring in these scientific studies around conversion therapy, these are empirical, these are quantifiable. The patterns of attraction these people are exhibiting when they go through these studies that show that conversion therapy doesn't work. So I think when you say, Prime, that we are humoring people who say they're straight when they've gone through conversion therapy, I think we are. I think we are humoring them because they still are showing these same patterns of attraction. They can call themselves straight, absolutely, whatever. That's their prerogative to self-ID, but that's not changing the material reality of the patterns of attraction that they show, which the research has obviously shown stays the same pre and post conversion therapy.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get to.